What's up,
Chat's
guys?
wondering if you're in jail. You might be using your webcam mic instead of your actual mic. It sounds really echoey on your side.
Me or Alexander?
Alex.
Okay. Oh
Other
wow, his
Alex.
name is
Wait,
Alex
dang
too. That's gonna be a mind fuck.
it. This Alex down here.
I'm gonna have to change here. I'm gonna change his name to Alexander the Second. Alexander Alexander replica. Okay, there
We
we go.
call him Lex.
There we go. But yeah, cool. What's up, guys? So sorry, apologies for the tardiness. I was actually just shooting a video with Eden, that chick who's been on the speed dates. She's in Miami, and it's going to be a really, really cool video we're dropping tomorrow. So I think you guys are going to really, really enjoy it. But yeah, I'm excited for this discussion. We were talking about this a few weeks ago. So we got someone very new joining us who you've never seen before. NotsoErudite Kyla. She's kind of like a blue pillar, and no, I'm just kidding. You've seen Kyla,
Purple
but you've
pill.
never seen Alexander. So Alexander, maybe you could just start off talking about like kind of what you do, and then we'll just build on that.
Sure. So I apologize for the mic. I can either do the headphones in here or the mic. So if the sound is bad, sorry about that.
Yeah, the quality is kind of tough in jail, but you know, I
Yeah.
appreciate the commitment.
Maybe they let me out soon. If I behave, if I don't get any fights, then they will let me go.
If you do a good job, I'll put in a good word for you for the jail.
Yeah. Get out of good behavior.
It's funny because the window behind your bed's broke. Behind your head's also a little bit broken, so it looks like you've been like, yeah, it just looks like you're in rough circumstances.
Sure. So, as I was saying, so my name is Alexander. I previously did a master's degree in research in behavior and cognition, now in behavioral and cognitive neuroscience. And I research dating, relationships, attractiveness, personality psychology, a little bit of evolutionary psychology, topics related to that. So that's kind of how I got into all of this. I comment sometimes on Manosphere topics, mostly on dating and relationships.
Cool. So what made you decide to research the Manosphere? That seems like a pretty, random choice, I guess.
Well, sure. So I suppose in this day and age, right, if you are a man and you're talking about relationships at all, it's almost inevitable that you will intersect with the Manosphere, with pickup artistry, with the red pill, and all of that, because certainly that is a big part of kind of what I call like our folk psychology, right? The ideas that we form popularly about relationships and about dating and that sort of thing.
Okay. Can you start talking? Also, I don't know why there's like some kind of it's showing me that there's 0 live viewers for some reason, even though there's a whole bunch of people in the chat. So that's not the case. So it's bugging, but whatever, we can just ignore that. Alexander, when you look, does it show you like on the top left? Does it show you like the live viewers, or you don't see that either?
No, I don't see any viewers.
Okay, that's weird. Okay, anyway, it doesn't matter. Whatever, I'll deal with that. All right, so let's talk about a little bit about like what you've researched and what are some of the big things that you have researched and some conclusions that you've come to in regards to this.
Well, I guess so. One thing that we could talk about that's specifically related to the Manosphere that I've researched a little bit, or that I've followed the research on, is related to the dual mate hypothesis, which I think is kind of the origin of the alphas and the betas, right? Which is kind of the folk psychology take of that dual mate hypothesis. And what was that? It was an idea in evolutionary psychology that women have a dual mating strategy, and particularly that that dual mating strategy. Oh, I'm dying. Excuse me. That dual mating strategy was related to shifts in female hormones, but not necessarily. And as time went on, this kind of research, it didn't replicate that well. If anyone follows psychology, there's what's called the replication crisis. Particular awareness now in psychology that a lot of past research doesn't replicate, which means when you go back.
Can you quickly explain a little bit more what the dual mating strategy is for anyone who's not familiar?
Sure, absolutely. So I think a lot of people will have a general idea of this if they've got into any discourse, on alphas and betas, right? The AFBBs, so to speak. So the idea is that women have a dual mating strategy, and one of those strategies is to seek good genes. And good genes in this context is kind of physical, right? It's good physical appearance, strength, physically, and that sort of a thing. While at the same time, the other part of the dual mating strategy is seeking a provider, right? someone who will stick around and care for the offspring, and that's the idea. Is,
Okay, alpha fox, beta bucks type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what kind of filtered down into the popular manosphere folk psychology of alpha fox, beta bucks. Exactly. And so certainly in psychology, there's what's called the replication crisis. A lot of the old results, they go back, they try to do the studies better, they don't replicate. And that's kind of what's happened with the dual mating hypothesis. And at the same time, a bunch of new research has emerged that has...
Sorry, Alexander, I don't mean to interrupt, but people in the chat are saying your audio is a little bit off. Is there any way you could maybe get closer or do something?
Yeah, I think probably getting closer is maybe the best that we can do.
Yeah.
Maybe that will be a little...
Ask the person guard to bring you like maybe a headset or something.
Yeah.
No, I think that's better. Okay, let's. Sorry, keep going. I don't mean to interrupt.
Sure. So, a lot of new research has accumulated. Well, first off, a lot of the early findings that would have supported that dual mate hypothesis haven't replicated very well. And then new research has accumulated. Evolutionary psychology has started to shift toward a new kind of macro hypothesis called the mate switching hypothesis, which kind of indicates something else. And it's not that women have a dual mating strategy, but essentially that women look for the same traits in men if it's for a short-term or a long-term partnership. So what would that be? If a woman is looking for a partner, she wants someone who's physically attractive, kind of regardless. If she's looking for a short-term mate, most of those short-term mating opportunities are actually seen as potential long-term mates. So things that signal value, even in short-term mating contexts, are also important in a long-term mating context, which means pro-social behavior, being able to provide for a family, being able to accumulate resources, altruistic behavior to some extent, those sorts of things.
Okay, so let me kind of, I guess, think on that, what my thoughts are on this. So I think that generally, I would say I somewhat agree with you. I think that the red pill community greatly overblows the alpha fox beta bucks. They make it seem like that's like literally every girl. In reality, that's a small percentage of women. A very small percentage of women are, they have like a beta provider and they're also cheating on him with like some alpha dude, right? But that's a small percentage of women. Most women want a guy who, actually is successful financially and also, is alpha in his own way, right? So most women want that in one guy. It just so happens that some women don't get that, and some of them, small percentage of them, venture out and look for this like alpha, whatever fox type of dude. But I do think the red pill community overblows it, and I can see how, like, when you're trying to replicate that, you might not be able to get to a statistically significant point because it is a small percentage of women. I think I don't know what percentage, but probably less than 20%. I would venture to say have like an alpha guy they're fucking and beta guy that they're like being supported by, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing that you touched on was was women want the same thing for short term, long term. Generally, mostly yes, but there are some differences. Like I think a guy's like level of integrity, for example, doesn't really matter that much for short term, right? For just like a one night stand, but it makes a huge difference for long term. A guy's like, I think values, unless he's something crazy, don't really matter that much for like casual sex, but they make a huge difference for long term. His family dynamics, right? That's another good one. Like his relationship with his family. Short term, it doesn't really matter. Long term definitely plays a role. So I do think that most things are exactly the same short term or long term, but there are some distinct things that matter long term, which don't matter short term.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said there is also kind of related to something that occurs in the manosphere kind of red pill spaces, right? Which is the AWOLT idea, right? All women are like that. But as you kind of said now, you said, people say that women are all like this in a certain way. But you said, maybe 20% of women are. And that's also something that's very consistent in the research. It's actually one of the large sex differences between men and women that we see is a trait called sociosexuality. And what is that? Basically the willingness to have casual sex with many, many partners. So interesting, you said about 20% of women maybe are like that. And in epidemiology, in research on sexually transmitted diseases and that sort of thing, there's also what's called the promiscuous 10%. And so you see that there's like a 10% of the population, of men and women both, that are much more promiscuous, that are
my people.
Kind of responsible for a lot of the transmission of the sexually transmitted diseases as well. The rates are much higher, of course, because they're more promiscuous. And so that's kind of what you see. And there's a big difference in sociosexuality between men and women. Men score much higher. And I think what happens kind of with that AWOL is what people try to do is they say all women are like that, but then they're taking like that promiscuous 10% and trying to kind of apply that to the remaining 90%, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think that, you know, podcasts like Fresh and Fit do a massive disservice into painting a picture of what like the average woman is like. Like I've often said this: the average Miami girl is nothing like you see on Fresh and Fit. Those women definitely exist, but that's not the majority of women in Miami, right? The majority of women in Miami are like actually normal human beings, right? So this guy actually makes a good point. So I have to correct myself. Alpha fucks beta bucks isn't about women cheating. It's about hooking up with the alphas when she's not looking to settle down, but then marries a provider with whom she has frequent sex. Okay, I think you're right, Sid. I think I got my whatever that slogan wrong. What do I think about that? Hooking up with the alpha, she's not looking to settle down, but then marries a provider with whom she has frequent sex. That certainly happens. I think like that definitely happens. The question is, how often does it happen? I would venture to say that more often than not, more than 50% of women they're not even good. They're gonna marry, like, meaning like their type doesn't change that much. They're not like fucking like a super alpha rock star and then marrying like a super boring dude. I think that certainly happens. But I think more women are like relatively, you know, somewhat consistent in their choices. But yeah, I do think that when you go into long term, there are things the woman takes into account, like his financial situation. That's important. Relationship with the family, his values, and all of that type of stuff. Stability is really huge, you know, for long term, and that's why you can see that effect playing out. The question is to what extent. I guess I'd be curious to see what you think, both you and Kyla, is this, because I think we can all agree that happens. But the question is to what extent. So.
Well, I could be wrong, and what I was understanding from the data that Alex, you've sent me in the past, and also what you were saying here, is that when we're talking about women, we don't actually see a lot of women ever really preferring a short-term dating strategy. They almost always seem to be preferring long-term dating strategy. So even when they're doing like casual hookups, like they're often selecting for, in many ways, the same type of men that they would be selecting for who they want for long-term. Is that correct? That's my understanding, at least, is that almost no women have this, like this short-term dating strategy for women almost doesn't, it's not really like a thing that's strongly seen. It seems like they dominantly prefer. That was my understanding of like the new bus research.
But Kyle, you have to acknowledge that like a lot of women, like even if they want like more casual sex, they're probably not going to say that on the survey. Like a lot of women, they're like ideally looking for like a long-term type of thing, but they're totally willing to have like a lot of casual sex in the meantime, right? So those women do exist. And if asked, that woman will say, well, ideally I'd like a long-term relationship, sure, but like are her actions reflecting that? Well, potentially. I think
sure. The question is, if they're saying ideally they'd like a long-term, the question is, are they selecting men based on what they prefer long-term always? They're just settling for casual sex because they realize that like that's the dynamic of dating today. That would be my question. Like, is there these two strategies that we see consistently emerging, especially in like retroactive data? So like not self-report, but like what we see people pairing with, whether it's short-term or long-term. And I'm curious to know if there's a divergence in like what is actually being selected for, because it's kind of touted like self-evidently this is the case. I just don't know if I've seen like the data that reflects it clearly in that direction, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm just also going to absolutely no disrespect to Alexander at all. I'm personally, I've talked about this publicly, is that I'm really weary of like when it comes to manosphere stuff and dating stuff, like there researchers and like, you know, like whatever studies in terms of that. I just find that like I think the best people who have information, in my opinion, are people who are actually in the game and try to look at things objectively. But again, you can make an argument for why that's like kind of like I'm a biased in that way. But also I think that like just anecdotally, I know anecdotes are like the lowest form of data, but you know, they are something. I mean, I have seen multiple cases of exactly what he's describing, which a girl hooking up with alphas and then, you know, settling down with like kind of a beta guy. Like I have seen that. I'm sure you have as well, Tyler.
The issue, I have two. The issue is that because women are actually selecting for short-term and long-term differently, or are women selecting the exact same? The issue is if a guy can get short-term with her, she has access to a lot of like maybe higher quality men because she's willing to give them short-term sex, even though she's hoping that she can convince this guy. She's hoping that the alpha will be convinced that her pussy's so good that he wants to settle down, or whatever the like logic would be, right? Like whatever crude language you want to use around it. But the issue is she selecting for different things, things, or does it just happen to be the case, for example, that when she finally finds a guy who is willing to settle down with her, it tends to be a slightly lower quality, because when it comes to like casual sex, unsurprisingly, the like super like most coveted men are able to access high levels of casual sex, and therefore that woman is able to access him.
I would
Is that making sense what I'm describing?
Yeah,
here?
no, what you're saying makes sense. I would speculate though that could play a role, but that's not the majority of it. I do think that some women will select differently for short term and long term in ways okay, like every girl likes a guy who's like not crazy, who's stable, right? But when it comes to like casual sex, like your financial situation doesn't really matter. Like your relationship with your family doesn't really matter. Versus with long term, that stuff absolutely matters. So that's kind of, I mean, it's a little bit of a caricature because I don't think it's like super black and white. It's not like the beta box is like a super duper beta dude, right? More often than not. He's just a dude who's more beta than the other guys she's having casual sex with. Now, another part of this argument, which I probably agree with, is that women genuinely are not sexually attracted to beta guys. And that's why you see a lot of dead bedrooms. So when a guy becomes like super beta and he's just like kind of like a walkover. He has no boundaries. He doesn't treat himself with respect. Thus, she's not going to treat him with respect. She just loses sexual attraction. But quite often not, the woman's going to stay married either for the family, because they might have kids, or just because she likes his stability, because maybe he's paying the bills. So I do think that stuff definitely happens. I'm just not sure how often it happens.
Sure. So I guess one thing that's really important to separate here is green flags, which is what women are looking for, versus yellow flags and red flags. So it is possible that in casual relationships, yellow and red flags are less valued or less cared about by women, but that doesn't mean that the green flags between short-term relationships, what women are looking for, and long-term are different. And I think it's really important to separate these things. So I would buy, for example, that women probably care less about red flags in casual relationships because they don't need to, because a lot of red flags are going to be more so about things like stability markers, like he doesn't have a job. Well, if the sex is good, it doesn't matter because you're not relying on him long term. But that doesn't change that, for example, the green flags of what she's looking for might change. So that would be what I'm really curious about, is to see are the green flags the same? Are the yellow flags the same? Are the red flags the same? I'm not really sure. And we have to kind of disentangle these things. And this is where I think yeah, I agree with you. When you talk about the manosphere and science, I think the manosphere and dating in general has been vastly underserved by science. I'm sure Alex will probably tell you, up until I feel like in the last 5 to 6 years, I've been seeing pretty meh research for the most part. There's really only David Buss and a couple of others. There's the Gottmans, but they were more about marriage. And there's Tai Tashiro, but he was also a lot more about marriage. There just wasn't a lot of research into dating and sex and the stuff that the manosphere is the most concerned about. But that doesn't mean that science can't aid the manosphere, because all these little nuances of green flags versus yellow flags versus red flags and what women are looking for between, this is something best teased apart by science.
No, yeah, I definitely am not advocating we should just completely dismiss science. I think there's some, one piece of science that I constantly refer to is the infamous OkCupid study, right? So they retroactively looked at 10,000 profiles and they wanted to see what photos get girls to respond. And their results actually completely reflect my anecdotal experience. What they found is the two photos. Actually, let me see. Can you guys guess? What are the two types of photos that perform better than every other type by far? What do you think those are?
So when you're holding a fish, right?
No. What do you think? What do you think it is, Kyle?
Sorry, I got a really loud alert in my ear. That was very funny. Can you re-say? I'm so sorry.
You're good. What do you think are so the study found there's two types of photos that perform way better than every other type of photo. What do you think those two types of photos are?
Is there a multiple choice, or do you want me to just guess which photos?
Yeah, just take a guess. Yeah, I'm just curious to see
if he's posed well with a dog. I feel like dog photos are going to do really well.
That's one.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm
see
so good.
See if you can guess the second.
Okay, it's what is that show, Family Duel, where you have to guess the most top-ranked things? Okay, it's not fish. It's not a guy holding fish. It's not a guy near his truck.
Not truck. No.
It's maybe a guy with girls around him.
No.
No? Damn it. Okay, what is it? I don't know.
Do you have any guesses, Other Alex?
I'm trying to think. I want to say a shirtless photo because I've seen mixed results.
Yeah,
was it?
Exactly.
Was it? Yeah.
Dog photos are number one. A shirtless photo is 1% below whatever.
Okay, here's the real question. If this was guys selecting girls, which photos would be most top ranked? The girl in a slim bikini, looking dummy thick with her ass turned away
Yeah,
the
of
camera,
course.
or a girl hugging her dog?
Yeah, obviously. But
It
so
would be
so
like
those are,
this, right?
so those are the very top, and every other photo like doesn't even come close. Travel photos, group photos, activity photos, none of them are like nearly as high as those two photos, right? And that's perfectly reflective of my anecdotal experience coaching, right? There's other really interesting data in that study. Like it talked about like whether it's better to look at the camera, look away at the camera, smile or not smile. Like that study, basically confirmed like all the kind of personal anecdotal experience I've had. So yeah, for sure, I'm not like against science. I just think there's not that much good science. And I'm also very like skeptical of people like Rello who are theory junkies who have no experience talking to women at all, and all they do is just read things on the internet, some of which is biased, and then just form conclusions which are like radically incorrect. So I do think it's better if you have like some actual experience with women to balance out all the research you're doing. That's just kind of like my 2 cents.
Well, it sounds like
Yeah.
you're saying I don't like bad research, right? Rollo Tomasi is not exactly like renowned in the academic field as a really, really like careful scrutinizer of the data. I could be wrong. Alex is a little bit more in academia than I am, but I
He's
don't.
renowned as the #1 debate dodger in history of debate dodging.
Yeah, Rollo is at this point. He I guess he has changed his mind about evolutionary psychology recently. He's been saying evolutionary psychology because why? Because the research doesn't support a lot of what he is saying. Perhaps some of the things, as far as the dual mate hypothesis, he based a lot of that ideology on that early on, and now if you have a very ideological position, and it's hard to change that if new evidence comes along.
Yeah, for sure. You get selection bias, so you ignore everything that doesn't contradicts your worldview, and you focus on the stuff that confirms it. Right? You see this all the time, and that's like if you're trying to be like an actual scientist, like that's not something you can do. You have to like take all data into account. You can't just focus on the data that proves the point.
He's not a real scientist. Like
No, he's definitely not for sure. I'm just saying, like for whatever you believe, you can find technically research that supports it. I'm sure you could find research that supports that climate change isn't real. I'm sure you could even find research that supports the earth is flat, right? You can find research for like any belief you have if you're willing to like really like lower the bar for what is a good, but you have to look at all the data. You can't just select bias. But yeah, Alex, so let's move on to what's it called? The next thing that you've kind of discovered, and we'll just discuss them one by one.
What is that? What? Just any other thing, just anything like that.
Yeah, any other like big thing that you've researched that you've.
Okay, sure. So something that was related to what we were just talking about that I think we could get into more as well was the question. So when women have a hookup, right? When they have casual sex, is this because they want casual sex in and of itself, or is it because casual sex is an entry to a relationship? And certainly that's something that some of the research indicates is that even during casual sex, women are actually interested in having a relationship with that person rather than sex just for its sake. And some of the research supporting that and related to that would be research on the orgasm gap. And that's essentially how often do women orgasm in relationships versus casual sex. When you look at the rates that women report for orgasms from a single hookup, it's very low. It's something like 10%. Second hookup, it's a little
Not
higher.
if they're with me. No, I'm just kidding. Keep going.
Third hookup, it's a little higher than that. And then when you look at women in relationships of 6 months or more, then you get an orgasm rate of like 60%. So it's probably the case that a lot of casual sex for women is kind of like Kyla said, that the initial sex may be a way to enter a relationship. It may be that they are, in a sense, using sex perhaps because it's very common simply to have sex early, even when you want a relationship, because it's kind of the norm for the dating world right now to have sex kind of early.
Okay, Alexander. So I am fully willing to concede that happens from time to time, for sure. There's some women who definitely are in that category. But the question is, what percentage? To what extent? How common is that? Are we talking like 10%, 50%, 90%? Like that's the more interesting question, because we all know that happens. We're just how often does it happen?
Well, I think most people are actually pretty willing to have sex kind of early on when they're dating someone. I think it's usually about 2 to 3 weeks is an average, but a lot of people have sex much earlier than that. the question, and this is something that's difficult to test or know from the research, is how many people are having casual sex because they have a very high libido or because they have very high sociosexuality and they just want casual hookups, no string sex, and how many people are having sex because they would like something more of a relationship to come from that. And certainly
is there any data on that? Like what percentage is what?
That's the thing. Data specific, well, kind of. So as I mentioned, there's different kind of converging points of data on that. One would be something like the orgasm gap, which seems to be that most women don't really enjoy their hookups very much. Another would be recent research that found most women, when they have an affair, for example, they report actually being in love with that person. When women have sex with someone early in a relationship, similarly, they report having an interest in a relationship with that person. Actually having sex for sex sake is not quite as common, and that would be about 27%. So kind of what you're saying. Maybe it's, and then you have the promiscuous 10%, the people that are having most of the sex, that are having very high sociosexuality for women, kind of like you said. So you're looking at between 10 and 20% that could fall into that.
My speculation is that it would be like 50, somewhere around 50-50, like 50% of the girls who are having casual sex just doing it because they want to have casual sex, and 50% are doing it because they secretly want to be in a relationship with that guy, and they're either blatantly or very subconsciously, telling the guy that they're looking for more. So there's definitely, I think, like 50% of girls at least are like doing that, right? But I think there's also a good amount of girls who just like to have casual sex. I mean, I guess my data point is that I've done a lot of podcasts and I've asked girls those questions, and I've just kind of seen it go like 50-50. Like some girls are straight up, yeah, I want a relationship. But some girls are like, hey, listen, I just want casual sex. Like I'm focusing on my career right now. I'm focusing on my education. I'm not looking for a boyfriend or just to have a relationship. I just want to fuck, I just want to fuck, buddy. I just want someone who can, make me feel good. I think, yeah, like this is kind of the tough spot, is it like with research is using indirect stuff to like talk about like a main topic, right? Because the orgasm gap, yes, that exists. I've seen the data on that. I don't doubt that at all. I'm sure that exists, but that's not like there's many conclusions for why that could be. I think a big part of it is that women need comfort, right, in order to have a good sexual experience to orgasm. And so a woman is not going to get comfort typically on the first date, but after the third date, she's going to feel more comfortable. Thus, she's going to be more likely to orgasm. But comfort in of itself is not indicative of the fact that the girl wants a relationship secretly, right? She just wants comfort, right? Comfort exists for casual sex too. Like you can feel comfortable with your fuck buddy, you can feel like somewhat uncomfortable. So also, the more you have sex, the better you get at it. So you start to understand the woman's body better. Like you know how to navigate her a lot better. Like everyone has their own turn-ons and turn-offs. So the first time it's like always a little awkward because you don't know exactly what she's into. By the third time, you kind of know her turn-ons, you know her kinks, you know what turns her off, so you can kind of navigate that better.
Yeah, exactly. Sex always gets better as it goes on, in a way, particularly for women. It's almost always better than the very, very first time, anecdotally and as far as the reports and everything go. Something, that you mentioned also, when we look at sexual behavior data and all of that, a big limitation, unfortunately, is that a lot of it does kind of rely on self-reports. An example of that, I could go into that. I know people are kind of skeptical of that because you want to look at kind of behavior as perhaps a better measure of a report. But, if you look at the general social surveys, this is nationally representative statistics for the United States. I worked with these statistics in 2021, the most recent database. And one of the questions they ask is basically, who have you had sex with? Okay, and so most people, about 85% of women between ages 18 and 30 report having sex with a committed partner. And then 15% report having sex with someone outside of a relationship. And that's also pretty consistent with other data sets when you ask about like hookups and situationships. So kind of like you said, who are the people that are really engaging in casual sex a lot? It might be, about 10, 15, 20% or so.
Sure. Yeah. No, that kind of intuitively makes sense. But I wonder if that has any correlation on what that 10 or 15% of the girls who's having a lot of casual sex on what they want. Like, do they secretly want a relationship or they just want casual sex? I think that that's a little bit of a non sequitur. I mean, it's an interesting piece of data. But,
what do you think they should want?
I have no dog in that fight. It's up to them what they want.
So something else.
I'm the last type of person to tell people what they should be doing sexually.
I know. That's my job.
Kyla's the pussy police. She's like, all right, I gotta turn the BDSM down.
I'm just tired of convincing like women that they're going to be most happy with casual sex. It's just like the worst situation for women, and we like treat it like emancipation and freedom. I'm not saying that like I want to start forcing women to like these enforced monogamy situations, but I'm just like I'm so tired of like society like lying to young men and young women about like what will make them happy, which has been going on for all of society, but this is just like the new version of it. And it's deeply frustrating because it's increasingly leading people to be dissatisfied with relationships, and we're having like these relationship crises. And I just can't help but feel that these things are linked, which is why I'm willing to like weigh in, because I'm saddened to see like women having a 10% orgasm rate in like casual hookups. Like that's awful. Like that sucks. That's like that's the point of a casual hookup, right? It's to, like have sex and enjoy it. And so if like women are enjoying it like a 10% rate, like I don't know, that to me, I don't know, but I'm on my feminist dark, so I'm just like, that's what women need to know, that like, okay, well, you're only enjoying it at a 10% rate, so like maybe we should think about that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a few things I would say about that. At first, you got dipshits like Myron who say things like female sexual pleasure doesn't matter. Girls don't really enjoy sex; they're doing it for you. Like you got a whole bunch of like fucking dumbass red pillers who are spreading like weird red pill propaganda that has like absolutely no basis in reality. But I think also, I don't think we should be encouraging women to have casual sex. I don't think we should be pushing that. But I also don't think we should be ever stigmatizing women having casual sex. I don't think those women should be shamed. I don't think they should be stigmatized. That's what happens in a large part of the world. It's what happened for a long time. Still happens to some extent. So I'm like really weary of any kind of like judgment or stigmatizing of girls who want to engage in that. Because at the end of the day, nothing wrong with that. They're not doing any harm if they want to do it. And it also, a lot of it, we have to acknowledge, depends on the woman. Some women are not cut out for casual sex, like kind of like you, Kyla, from what you've told me. Like it seems like that's just not something that would work well for you, right? But not all women are built like you. Some women are like totally different.
It's not working out for about 90% of women, though. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Right.
So something
for
interesting.
10%, it does work.
Sorry?
For 10%, it does work.
Yeah, I'm not interested in shaming women for having casual sex. I would hope that that's been abundantly clear at this point.
No, I know you're not. I'm just clarifying.
On like body count for this long. There's no way I'm interested in shaming.
No, I'm not trying to imply that you were. I'm just talking in general. Like.
I'm just venting my frustration at the romanticization of like hedonism that's been sold to like young people constantly, and it just leaves everyone feeling used up, empty, and sad. I'm just tired of it. And like when I look at like the loneliness crisis of men, when I look at like women having like fear responses to just be around a guy in sexual dynamics, I just can't help but like look at that and be like, when I hear that 10% of casual hookups are ending in orgasm for women, I can't help but like just shake my head and be like, what were we telling these people this whole time? Like, what were we telling kids? It's insane. It's so sad. But yeah, of course, not shaming women. It's not like you're a bad girl if you have casual. You're not a bad girl. I'm just saying it seems to not be working out for like 90% of women, which sucks.
Well, I think we can also like make casual sex great again, so as to speak. Like, okay, what are some of the reasons why women get like have bad experience with casual sex? Well, I think the biggest one is the guys are lying to them, right? They're saying they want a relationship. The girl's having sex with the idea that, hey, this is going to lead somewhere, and the guy lied to the girl or exaggerated or gaslighted her and doesn't lead there. So it's not the fact that
not affect the orgasm, because she doesn't find out that it's a lie until post-sex anyway. So
sure, I was about to get to the orgasm too,
sorry.
but we can't deny the fact that a lot of guys do that, right? Something I don't advocate. I think you should be very upfront. This is the reason why I personally, as far as I remember, never actually had a girl that I had casual sex with like send me nasty texts or anything like that. I think if you talk to like vast majority of girls I've had casual sex with, they'll say like semi-nice things about me. Yeah, he was cool. He was chill. Yeah, he was honest, right? But I think that's totally different if you're like leading the girl on saying, no, you're going to be my girlfriend. You fuck her and then you ghost on her, right? I can see how that's going to really fucking piss a chick off. That's the first person. I think just being more upfront and honest about what you're looking for, it should be the strategy. And so it's such a better strategy long-term. Way less headaches. The girl's going to respect you more. Way higher chance of you getting around too. She's not gonna, talk shit about you to her group of friends. She might even introduce you to her friends. It's just such a better strategy. But I think a lot of guys are under the impression you need to kind of like trick her into it. You can't be upfront about what you want, which is not true. I think the second thing is most guys just being horrible in bed. Like the vast majority of men have no idea what the fuck they're doing in the bedroom. Combine that with the fact that sex is, like something for most women that requires comfort, right? You have a pretty, nasty combination of women never coming, right? But like I would say, again, I don't know how to say this without like making it seem like I'm like self-bragging, whatever. So just take it as is. But I don't have a 10% orgasm rate. Okay, like I much higher. Like I would say mine is like 80% or 90% or something like that. The exact opposite, right? But again, there's for several reasons. One is I actually care about making the woman come. Like I want to make the girl come. I want to make her come multiple times. If I only made the girl come once, I'm like, I want to make the girl come at least 2 or 3 times, at least, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is I understand female sexuality, and I'm not gonna just like fucking go from making out to like jackhammering her, right? I understand that women require lots of foreplay, so I'm gonna tease her a lot. There's gonna be lots of foreplay. I'm gonna wait until like her panties are like soaked before I even like put my penis inside of her, right? And I understand that like, just jackhammering a girl doesn't really do for most girls, that it needs to be like passionate and intense. A lot of this is just like, vocal and visual, right? Kind of like, just the way you talk to her, kind of like the situation you build. So I think that it doesn't need to be 10%. It can be well over 50% if guys just got better at fucking, but most guys are not. And then you have, again, like, dipshits in the red pill community who say things like women's sexual pleasure doesn't matter. Like it's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So yeah, I think that that problem can be fixed if guys follow the correct information.
Yeah, there's certainly a question about how much of that is, like as you said, simply due to men not caring, not trying, and like you said, there's people in the manosphere saying things like, "I don't even care if I make a woman come." And that's the message that they're telling other young men. And of course, that's a very different perspective than what you just said. Like, like I try to learn about female sexuality. It's actually important for me to make sure that a woman has a good time. And certainly one thing, that I think probably is consistent with the research, but certainly is consistent with experience, if the woman has a good time, she's going to come back. If she doesn't have a good time, she's not going to come back, and she's not going to enjoy that experience. And maybe that will impact how she views casual sex down the line as well with other people.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's if you're just like, I don't know, like you don't have a soul, you're just looking at purely pragmatically. From a purely pragmatic perspective, it still makes sense to give a girl a good sexual experience. She's way more likely to come back, way more likely, and she's gonna tell good things to her friends. And sometimes you might get to have sex with her friends. I've had that happen a few times. So yeah, there's just so many advantages to like being good in bed. Also, like just for me personally, I don't know, maybe I'm like different, but I get turned on by making a girl come. Like that's kind of like really attractive to me. Like I don't know, but yeah.
You would think it would be to most men, why would it not be? It's kind of a part of the whole biological function there that female arousal should make you aroused as well as a heterosexual man, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many like toxic beliefs in the manosphere. Like, I feel like every day I get just more disillusioned with like the manosphere. But like this idea that it's like beta to eat pussy, that's like the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Because technically you're beneath the girl, like I guess in a very logical way. Dumbest shit ever. Nothing beta about eating pussy. I don't think like fucking Leonardo DiCaprio is like, oh geez, I would have eaten you out, but like it's kind of beta. I heard on this dude on the internet. So yeah, a lot of dumbass fucking beliefs that you hear in the manosphere. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Kyle? Or do you want to move on to the next one?
I'm good to move on.
All right, cool. Well, all right, so let's, I guess, move on to the next point, Alexander.
So let's see. Well, there's so much that we can go over. Here is something else that's also semi-related to what we talked about. So who's being promiscuous? Why? Who is seeking out casual sex more than others? This behavior is also heritable. So this is something that can be identified through twin studies, genetic twin studies, and individuals that have had parents, for example, that are more promiscuous also tend to be more promiscuous. They tend to form shorter relationships or more relationships over the lifetime, more sexual or romantic relationships. they don't stay in those relationships as long. And like a lot of personality traits, you know, pretty much across the board, you have what's called the 50-0-50 rule, which is about 50% of personality, which includes, you know, behavior. I say personality, but it includes behavior, is heritable. So that is kind of one of the differences. So when we think about like, is casual sex beneficial for women? Are they getting much out of it, or are they not? Who desires this or who doesn't? It's not purely something that is learned, but it's also something that is a difference between individuals that to some extent is a part of their genetics. And there have even been gene studies that identify specific genes associated with infidelity, with promiscuity, and that sort of a thing as well. Also interesting in that because people question self-reports, but we do see that when people self-report having a lot of partners, those are, you know, that's the variable that predicts kind of the association with these genes or with the association of promiscuity in parents and that sort of a thing as well.
So, Alexander, you're saying it's like 50% nature, 50% nurture, essentially?
That's basically the general rule. And of course, every trait is going to differ. You know, some might be more heritable, some might be more environmental, but typically across the board for personality traits, that's kind of the 50-0-50 rule in behavioral genetics, that approximately 50% of the variance is due to genetics and the other 50% is due to the non-shared environment.
Yeah, that intuitively totally makes sense to me. I've always known it's a combination of nature and nurture, right? Everything about you. The question is to what extent. I've always thought it's like they both play a big role. So I never was like, oh, it's definitely all like, I mean, I think nurture can definitely be a huge role, right? But yeah, nature also like definitely matters. Like some people just have a massive like genetic advantage and, you know, whatever. Like I don't know, like again, not to like self-brag, but like I was just born funny. Like I didn't have to like really work on my humor. Like I was just like always funny, like growing up, right? That's like a gift I have, right? But then, you know, for example, I have really bad short-term memory, right? So I have like also like whatever. I'm really bad at tech. I'm really bad at analytical stuff, certain types of analytical stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like, yeah, but so you can build on, you know, the really good traits you have to some extent. But yeah, that intuitively very much makes sense to me. So I have nothing to dispute there. Kyle, do you have anything on that?
Nope.
Damn, Kyle is silent today.
I mean, what do you want me to do? Just fight with data? I'm not
Yeah,
interested.
fight with data.
Yeah.
You're like, fuck
Yeah,
you,
I mean,
motherfucker. It's 5149.
Right. I could get into like details of being like, oh, what's the methodology of these things? But a lot of the studies that Alex is citing, he sent me already, and I've like looked through them, so I'm like aware of what these things are. And like, I don't know, I'm very much on like trying to be informed as much as I can be by data and getting really good at figuring out which data is worth listening to, because that's a really important skill, is understand the scientific method. So it's like, this is what the data shows. I'm gonna be like, okay, interesting. I will consolidate that information.
I don't think Alex knows how to be humble. I consider myself actually pretty fucking humble. It's just like I'm trying to communicate the point. I don't know how to say it in a humble way. Like I'm legitimately not trying to brag. I don't know if you're going to believe me or not, but I'm just legitimately trying to express the point. All right, Alexander, let's get into the next one.
So the next one, well.
Does the chat have any fights with the data?
Yeah, maybe that you know, there's so many different topics. It's difficult to pluck one out of thin air. So because there's so many different things.
Well, just
going on.
whatever you think is like the most important, the thing that you were most impressed by. We don't have to go in any specific order. No, I mean I've been more paying attention to like what you're saying instead of the chat. But what I was thinking of doing is after we get through like some more points is just opening up the panel, opening up the chat, and then, you know, we kind of build on that.
All right, Alex, how do we trust any of this sex data? How do we trust all these self-reports when we think that people are going to lie?
Okay, sure. So that's a good question, because that is a pretty big limitation when we look at sexual behavior and all of that. And certainly within dating, within pickup, within the red pill and manosphere, people are very skeptical of that. There's almost kind of a dogma, like women won't admit things, they're going to lie. This kind of assumes that there's a big taboo around self-reporting sex, which may not be the case. But so anyway, we rely on a lot of self-report data. How do we know that might be good or not? So one way that you can do that is to kind of corroborate it with data on sexually transmitted diseases. I think that's a pretty strong corroboration, at least as far as some of the things that are discussed kind of in the Manosphere and Red Pill. An example would be kind of the 80-20 rule that some people say for example, that only 20% of men are having sex with 80% of women. This is something that, if that were the case, we would see that in the sexually transmitted disease data. We would see a sharp drop-off in male STDs, and we would see an increase in female STDs. But what we've seen very, very
pretend I'm 5. Pretend I'm 5, okay? I have the brain capacity of a grade 5er. Why would STD rates have anything to do with sex having? Just explain it for me. Just pretend I'm really dumb. Just explain why these things make sense.
Occasionally, so sexually transmitted diseases are transmitted by sex. So having sex increases the probability of contracting a disease. And then there's an exponential factor here as well, because individuals who are more promiscuous are also more likely to pair up with other individuals who are more promiscuous. So it's almost not even just like having sex with one person, but, you know, and in the old kind of sex ed classes, they used to say it, like, it's like having sex with all of the partners of the other person. Further, individuals who are more promiscuous, they're also actually less likely to use condoms and that. So you get what's called, you know, like I mentioned, that promiscuous 10%, where you see about 10% of men and women who are disproportionately responsible when they go into the clinics for getting a lot of STDs. And if it were the case, you know, that not very many men were having sex, and that only a small percentage of men, 10, 20%, as in the 80-20 rule, was having sex with all of the other women, what we would see is a much smaller rate of STDs for men. We would see that drop off on average overall, and we would see an increase or stability for women. But we don't see that. We see that STD rates go in tandem, and they have for many, many decades, and that's much more consistent with a 1-1 ratio of people having sex, men and women, which is also very consistent with the self-report data for sex, pretty much regardless of what data set you use. You know, that men and women report having sex at about the same rates. Most people are having sex over the course of 1 year with a partner. Not a lot of people are having casual sex, but you do get that 10% of people who kind of are having a lot of casual sex, but also mostly with each other, right? It's an assortative effect.
Alexander, so you disagree with the 80-20 rule?
Yeah, pretty much.
let me give you my counter argument. So first of all, I think this is homosexual men account for, like, you have to keep in mind that when they measure that, they actually.
This is only
Alex.
This is,
I'm so excited for you to experience the.
This is only heterosexual.
Oh, this is only heterosexual.
This is only heterosexual.
Fair enough.
But have you ever thought about these heterosexual men aren't having sex with women? They're taking condoms from the 20% of men that are having sex with women, sticking it on themselves and rubbing it all their genitals so that they too can experience the bliss of STDs to increase the rate of STDs amongst men, but they're not actually having sex with women. Did you account for that in your study? Alex, state sake.
I did, actually, because I love getting an STD.
The homosexual men is also an interesting question because, of course, they do have rates of STDs much, much higher. And if women were as promiscuous as homosexual men are, which is kind of what happens when people assume that 80-20, right? They're assuming that women are being super promiscuous, right? They're riding the cock carousel, so to speak. They're going through this whole phase, and they're being really, really promiscuous. You would expect STDs to skyrocket. They would be much higher than male STDs. They would be at a much more disproportionate rate. And where do we really see that? Well, we see that with men because that's very typical of male sexual behavior. It reflects the libido gap, the higher sociosexuality. Men want a lot of casual sex. If it's men having sex with men, well, perfect, because they're going to find it. The homosexual men are going to, they have that at their fingertips. Heterosexual men don't, right? Because women are much more sexually restricted, and the STD data reflects that. So there's another way that we can kind of corroborate if self-reports of sexual behavior data are accurate at all. One of those ways is, what do they predict, right? In psychology, you have predictive validity. Anytime you see a study that says something like number of sexual partners predicts X, then if it's able to predict that, you know that there's at least some accuracy in the report. An example would be when you say more sexual partners predicts divorce. This is something people talk about a lot. They say, people who get married when they have fewer sexual partners are less likely to divorce. Well, certainly if people were completely erroneous in their reporting of sexual partners, right? If women were saying, no, I'm a virgin, but really they had 20 sexual partners, you know, we wouldn't be able to do this kind of predictions. And then another avenue on top of that, there have been multiple studies that have used lie detectors to see if people change their reports. Now, of course, a lie detector, a polygraph, can't actually detect a lie. I think a lot of people know that now. They didn't know that before. And so the idea is not that you can hook someone up and actually know if they're lying. The idea is that people don't always know that. So you can put someone on the machine and you can say, okay, well, you can ask them first. You say, tell me how many people you had sex with. Then you can bring them back the next day from the lab. You can put them on the machine and say, okay, this is going to catch you if you're lying. Do they change their reports? They do, but very, very, very little. There's very little exaggeration. And then even I think,
I want to go to the 80-20 rule and just talk about that a little bit more. So I think I agree that the 80-20 rule is greatly oversimplified. Here's how I think it really works. I'll give some nuance. So I think 25% of men are having no sex, and we're pretty confident in that. That's according to a whole
or more.
25% of men are incels. They've reported having no sex in the last decade, right? 25% of men are having no sex, roughly. I think it's 27, but whatever. We're just going to round a little bit. 25% of men are having no sex. I think then another 65% of men are having some sex. They have probably 5, 6, 7 sexual partners. They're probably in a relationship, or they mainly have sexual relationship. Maybe they have a one night stand here or there, but their weight count is in single digits, right? They're not fucking a lot of girls. That's objectively another 65% of men. We're including people who are married, people who are in relationships, right? Or people who just just got a relationship, maybe have one night stand, but probably gonna get into a relationship soon. That's 65% of men. That altogether is 90%. And then I think there's 10% of men who have a fairly high body count. They're in the double digits. But I would say even with those, we can put those in 2 categories. The first category I would say would be we can put 9% of men. 9% of men are, their weight count is in double digits. They've had a fair amount of casual sex. They know their way around, but it's in the double digits, not in the triple digits, right? They've had sex maybe with 30, 40 people. They're maybe they had a big casual sex spree and then they got into a relationship, or maybe they're just serially, they're not dating anyone. They're just having casual sex, but their game isn't perfect, right? And then we have 1% who has insanely high weight count of men. These are guys who fucked 300, 400 girls. This includes celebrities, some celebrities, not all. This includes athletes. This includes, anyone who has clout or status. This includes multimillionaires who use seeking and pay for sugar babies. And this includes also a very small percentage of men who have really, really good game, who have dedicated years of their life to going out and picking up girls, like serial players, and they may or may not be in the pickup community. They don't always necessarily have to be. I know guys who been with hundreds of girls. They don't even know what the pickup community is, right? So that is kind of the way I see the breakdown.
Yeah, I mean, that's accurate. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think even now, actually, I think probably men not having sex, at least according to most of the recent data, it's probably even higher than that 20%. It's probably closer to 35, 40% now. But also the most recent data also shows that about the same amount of women, including actually a little bit more women, also aren't having sex. Many people won't believe that, but certainly it's pretty consistently what the data shows. Then on top of that, like you said, so you have... But
Alexander, one important thing we have to clarify is that with women, it's typically by choice. With men, it's typically not by choice.
Sure. The idea that women are the gatekeepers of sex, certainly that's kind of a principle of evolutionary psychology in that sense. And that's something I think that's pretty consistent with what you would expect from a convergence of behavioral data. That, certainly we have, for example, the old Clark and Hatfield studies, which have been replicated many times since then, where they would send men and women different levels of attractiveness as well. So they're controlling for their attractiveness. And they approach strangers on campus. Some are women, some are men, so the men go up to women and they say, will you go on a date with me? And then in another condition, they say, will you have sex with me? When an attractive woman approaches a man, a strange man, and says, will you have sex with me? Something like 80% of men are just like, yes, and they agree. Women, 0. No women will just say, yeah, I'll have sex with you, to an attractive man that just runs up and is like, hey, would you have sex with me? Even an attractive man has to spit a little bit of game, probably, for that kind of cold approach. So that's a big difference in sexual behavior, that men will have sex just off the bat with an attractive woman, but women won't the same way, because, a difference in libido and sociosexuality, that sort of a thing. Women are, in that sense, the gatekeepers, whereas men are often available in that sense. And then, as you said, you do have 80% of men, that 10 20% or so, somewhere between there, that has a lot of partners. So that part of, the 80-20 rule, that percentage of men is not something that I would dispute. But what I think is gotten wrong about that is people assume that it's the 80% of women that are as promiscuous as that 20% of men.
Oh yeah, I disagree with that. Yeah, it's not 80% of women. It's less
Yeah,
than
so
60%.
you have, what's called assortative mating, and that's people select other partners who are similar to them. And this is also an extremely robust finding. And that includes selection for promiscuous behavior. People who are promiscuous select other people who are promiscuous. If you go on Tinder and you put up like, I'm seeking casual sex, you're more likely, probably to find other people who are also seeking casual sex. Even going on Tinder in the first place, because you are seeking casual sex, already puts you in a mating pool of other people who are. If you're someone who says, I'm not on Tinder because I'm not seeking casual sex, you're not even in the game, so to speak. So already just seeking that out aggressively, casual sex already kind of acts on that assortment effect there.
Yeah, I just want to quickly, I pulled this up. This is very interesting. Share with no sex in the past year. So again, past year, is not necessarily you're an incel, but it is something. And if we take a look at it, for a big part of history, it was really close. At some points, the red is women. At some points, actually, more women were not having sex than men. Now, you can make the argument in 1998, there was more stigma, so maybe some women were lying. But let's just take this as is. However, if we go to where we're at right now, there's a pretty significant, bridge between women who haven't had sex in a year and men. It seems like women kind of just goes up and down, stays in a certain range, versus men has been pretty low and then just been going up and up and up. And that kind of reflects, what I've seen. So yeah, it seems like it's still a lot less women who are, incels than men.
So this data is from the General Social Survey. I've worked with this data set. And what you posted here is from 2018, and that was the case in 2018. But I have newer statistics from the same data set, same survey, General Social Survey, from 2021. And in 2021, it's women are in the same data set are actually having less sex. I have the statistics on my website of that as well. And also on that.
Can you pull it up? I want to just take a look.
Can I pull it up on here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can just hit share.
Just press present, and it'll show your screen, or it should.
I'm not doubting you. I just want to see the data myself.
Sure. And on the website that you have, the Institute of Family Studies, they also have newer data on it as well. But yeah, I could pull it up if I figure out. Well, if you keep talking or something.
Yeah, sure. Well, Tyler, do you agree? Do you agree with my analysis?
Sorry, which one specifically?
Kyle, I'm not paying attention. I talked about that 25% of men are having no sex, 70 or 65% are having, single digit slay count, 9% are double digits, and they're having a good amount of casual sex, but not obscene amounts, and then 1% are fucking hundreds and hundreds of girls.
And this is assuming all age groups? We're collecting men?
Yeah, generally.
Men of all ages?
Sure.
Probably. The issue is if we break down the men not having sex, I bet you 80% of the men not having sex are between the ages of 18 to 30, right?
Yes.
Mostly young single men.
Yeah, the generation. There's also generational things. I feel I've talked to. I don't know. Again, this is kind of anecdotal, but I've seen multiple people tell me this. Is that my physical therapist, for example, he tells me, he's yo, dude, it's so awkward to have a 20-year-old patient. These guys are so socially awkward. None of them can hold a conversation. They're just on their phone the whole time. He's dude, when you come in and people who are your age or older, we can banter, we shoot the shit. He's these fucking 20-year-old kids have no idea how to actually have a conversation. That's something that I've heard from multiple people in similar jobs as him, is that that generation is just a lot more socially awkward on average, right? Not all of them.
I would think people over 3 digits is probably slightly less than 1%. I really think it's uncommon, to be honest. I think you're talking about the most, probably some of the most successful men with women who are going out of their way to systematize maximizing having sex, and that means that they're prioritizing sex over many things in their life constantly, right? I think there's definitely a unique type of guy that's going to be achieving 3 digits during his lifetime. if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know,
I mean,
0.01. I don't know what it is, but I think
It's going to be two types of guys. There's two guys that can fall into this category. Actually, three. The first one is a celebrity influencer, someone who has massive status and actually is not like monogamous, actually wants to fuck a lot.
Yeah, it's pursuing it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. But the second kind would be someone who's like a really successful in the pickup community, right? Someone who knows pickup and is actually like really followed through.
Mm-hmm.
The third is just going to be like your natural guy who's like very charismatic, confident, probably good looking, and he just like is a low key sex addict, right? So I'd say it's like those are the three. Yeah, it could be less than 1%, maybe it's a 0.5%. I don't know.
I'm not sure. I mean, we're literally just arbitrarily assigning numbers, so I'm just kind of willing to grant whatever. But I suspect it's a really, really small percentage because I think this is one issue I've noticed in talking to like some of my really young black pill guys. Right, I've talked with like a couple of like 18, 19-year-old black pill young men, and they're convinced that like that this 20% are all having sex with like hundreds of women by the time they're like 25.
Yeah,
and I'm just like,
it's
that's not right. But the issue is that's what's driving a lot of these like men to be like, oh my God, like what's the fuck is wrong with me? What do I do? What's wrong with me? These guys are out fucking hundreds of women and I can't land a single girlfriend, right? Like what's wrong with me? And so I just like really want to be clear. Like when we're talking about 3 digits and plus, we're talking about a very select,
very small percentage of them, for sure. Very small percentage. You might be like, we get a biased perspective. We're in their manosphere. There's a lot of like more guys, I think, in this community are going to have higher lay counts than like your average guy. But like your average dude who works in marketing, plays sports, like yeah, he doesn't have a triple digit lay count. Like that's pretty rare. So that's the first thing. Also, going back on like the women's lay count, I do think again another thing the red pill community gets wrong is they make it seem like the vast majority of girls in the U.S. are just having all this casual sex and racking up bodies, and your average chick has like 50 bodies, 100 bodies, 200 bodies. Again, not true. Most girls have a lay count in the single digits. That just kind of is what it is. It's a very small percentage of women, maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe at most 10% at most, who have a high lay count. That's not nearly as common as I think people think it is. I would say that if I had to take a guess with women, I would say that something like 60% of women have a lay count in the single digits. 30% of women have a lay count. No, sorry, like 38% of women have a lay count in double digits, and like 1 or 2% have a lay count in the triple digits.
Yeah, I think your estimates are actually very close. I think so.
Yeah. But yeah, we can move on to the next point, Alexander. If you're having a hard time pulling that up, no worries. We can just move on to the next.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Sorry. So, well, what should we talk about next then? And then I didn't have a list. I wasn't prepared.
Alex's chat is very funny. You should engage with Alex's chat. They're moulding about some of the things that you're saying.
60% of all women only have single digits. Rubbish. I mean, it's the truth. I mean, like
they're really motivated to be like women are really evil and dirty sluts, and the elite men are getting everything. That's
well, wait, hang on. We don't want straw man. Like, I don't think most of them think that women are evil, but I do think that most of them think women are sluts. That is
dirty
true.
sluts. Sorry, not
Dirty
evil,
sluts.
just dirty sluts. Yeah.
Just sluts.
I mean, this is very common. This is something I've
But
talked
can you
about.
like blame them? Like how much how much bad information there is in this community? Like, but that is something that's constantly being repeated over and over again. You know?
Yeah, it's part of a cultural, what I call promiscuity narratives. People really strongly believe that promiscuity is much, much more common than it is, which is inconsistent with the data. And it's much closer to like what you said, Alex, as far as that goes. There is a cohort of individuals that are very promiscuous, but kind of the bulk kind of isn't, and not having a lot of sex. Certainly, and that perception is fueled by the media. And if people spend a lot of time online and they just get information from what the algorithm shows you, that's going to be a bunch of promiscuity nonstop. And there's research on this as well, where if you take groups of friends and you pick one out and you ask, how much sex do you think your friends are having? And this occurs for men and women. They will overestimate how much sex their friends are having more than their friends will report, and it's not like, oh, women are afraid to report it or something, because it happens for men also. People overestimate the amount of sex other people are having. That's a pretty robust finding.
Sure. That I agree with you on that completely. Yeah, like girls will even do that to me. Like, I've been with a good amount of women, but like, I've like kind of slowed down. and they'll be like, "Oh, you're such a player." You're like, "Well, I used to be. You know, now I'm like a little bit more chill." Like, "Oh, how many women did you have sex with last month? Like 50?" I'd be like, "Oh, no, like one, like or two, like no." So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I can totally believe you on that. You have anything to add on that, Kyla?
Um, no, I'm sorry. I really don't. I don't have any
I think
intentions.
I think something Kyla said a minute ago is interesting also, and also that occurs kind of in that discourse, particularly among men that probably don't actually have a lot of experience dating and haven't had a lot of success. I think they underestimate the amount of time that it actually takes. Like if you are actually pursuing a lot of casual sex, it takes a little bit of time to, you know, get on Tinder, arrange the dates, go on the dates. This is even if you get a lot of dates, you know. I was on Tinder briefly for about a year. I went on maybe like 3 dates a week and talking to people, going on those dates and setting all that up. That's a lot of effort, you know, and considering that, you know, about half of men on Tinder don't get matches, you know, they see something like that and they think like, oh, it's so easy for other people, and maybe relative, you know, to someone that gets no matches at all, they see it as easy, but it's incredibly time consuming, and you do have to be the kind of person that is like extremely motivated to be like, I want to go on a bunch of dates, or I want to have a bunch of casual sex or something like that. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people, you know, they want to find a girlfriend or they want to find a boyfriend. And I think that's most people. They want a girlfriend or a boyfriend. They don't want to stay like single and have sex with as many people as possible, you know. And even if they do, you know what happens a lot of the time? Most friends with benefits, things like that, something about 60 or 70% ends up with one person falling in love. And more often than not, it's the woman. So even people that start out like, oh, I want casual sex, we're going to see where this situationship goes, give it 6 months, and a lot of the time those become relationships.
No.
Yeah, I want to comment on a few questions. Do you guys watch whatever podcast? All the chicks are outside, have 20 buys, 18. Yeah, me and Kyla were talking about going on there. But again, sample bias. There is sample biases, very strong sample biases that exist with Fresh and Fit, with whatever podcast. And that's like, for someone who's actually like out and talking to a bunch of girls and knows a lot of girls, like you can look at that and you can be like, yeah, dude, this is silly. Like this is not like 90% of the girls I talk to. But if you're not going out, you're not talking to girls, you have no experience, and you're basically taking what you see on like these podcasts as reality, I can totally see how you would come to a skewed, perception.
And the problem, like, I mean, think about it. These podcasts are incentivized to present sampled bias, right? Like all of these podcasts try to monetize making young men hate women to justify why you're sad and lonely, right? And the issue is like no one's disagreeing that young men are sad and lonely and experiencing like probably more obstacles. Your dog's very cute. More obstacles than like hi Natalie. Probably more obstacles than like in the last like probably 40 years. And more importantly, there's basically like no resources for these young men. The issue is like when you look at podcasts like whatever and Fresh and Fit, they're capitalizing on you to make money to sell you what you want to hear, which is that like it's all women's fault and not yours. So they're going to bring on women who are extremely like not the status quo. They're bringing on women that like don't know how to name 3 countries, right? If you think that like the average woman in America can't name 3 countries, US, Canada's above, Mexico's north. I'm sorry, like that's not typical, right? That's extremely
atypical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to sorry, one last point before I kick it off to you, Alexander. Like you guys know me, I have like no incentive to lie. I don't give a fuck about blue pill SJW shit. I have no sponsors. I say whatever the fuck I want. I just legitimately don't believe in that. And going off my experience. So Alex seems to think that women of all ages are below 10, which makes no sense. So what I'm saying is 60% of women of all ages are below 10. And that is reflective of, all the girls I've met. Like I've met a lot of girls, and I typically sometimes ask that question, and you might think, oh, the girl's lying to you, bro, right? But no, when you hang out with a girl enough, you kind of get an idea of what she's doing, what she's not doing, and over 50% of women don't have a super high lay count. Like that's just, I know Fresh and Fit says it does. I know whatever podcast says it does. It doesn't actually make it true. Go out and like hook up with like dozens of girls, ask them, and then you'll have more data basically.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. That's consistent with my own experience, and it's consistent with the data, So I no dispute on that case, none at all. I think something else maybe people don't always take into account as far as the dynamic goes is that when you have individuals that are more attractive, right? I'm talking about physically attractive or personality or whatever, behaviorally attractive, whatever makes them more attractive. It can be difficult for those individuals to stay single long enough to accumulate multiple, a body count, so to speak, multiple partners. You almost have to try, because if you are someone that wants a relationship or even that gets a lot of attention, a lot of the time those people get picked up and they enter relationships easily and quickly, and they don't stay single for very long. So who are the individuals that stay single and accumulate a lot of bodies? Well, you've described some of them, Alex, some of those people, but one of them, in one case, it's people who try. It's people who are deliberately trying to stay single and doing that. And that's not a lot of people. A lot of people want to get into a relationship,
Yeah, Alex, I'm sending you this $20 to buy something in DoorDash and eat on stream. Don't waste my money, please. Dude, I'm not hungry. I'm going to eat after. Dude, it was, I don't know, after all the fucking hate I got. How about this, Mr. Minecraft? Text or whatever, email me, and I'll send you a personal eating video. You can, I feel bad, or if you want me to refund you your money, I'd be happy to do that too.
Black Attack wants his mukbang.
Yeah.
Oh. So yes, you were talking about whatever and all of that. So yeah. I agree with both of you very much about what you said there as well. People, if they don't have a lot of experience in the real world, and we can look at it from different ways. We can say, okay, people that don't have a lot of experience, or people that haven't looked closely at the data. Because I do think, the data that I have seen, my personal experiences, I think it's pretty consistent with what you have said, Alex, and your experiences as well. I don't think there's actually a lot of disagreement or conflict going on with any of that. But when you look at these podcasts, they're set up in a way, like Kyla said, where you find the stupidest woman, the most promiscuous woman, you bring them on the show and you humiliate them, and that appeals to so many people, but it gives such a distorted view of what a normal person is like, or even what a person, I say normal, but even what a person who's kind of above average is like,
There's also a really big issue of people who go on these podcasts and are extremely performative, right? So I remember even on Fresh and Fit, looking at a lot of these girls' Instagrams after Fresh and Fit and being like, I don't feel like you were super honest on the podcast, because a lot of girls are absolutely incentivized, because a lot of the girls going on after something like Fresh and Fit especially are going to basically try to lean in, because they're going on to boost their own social media platform. And there's a lot of momentum in Yas Queen, kind of girl boss energy. And so them going on and being adversarial with these guys and stuff like that is also going to incentivize them to be playing up these characters and stuff like that. And then other girls will go on and very much try to appeal to the men. So they'll be very pick me, for example. I remember looking at one of the girls afterwards and being this girl touts as being a nice, clean Christian, but while she was on the podcast, she was talking about crazy stuff. And I don't know which is true. Probably one of them's true. I don't know which one it is, but it's just very not real life.
Yeah, I want to also address this. It's an interesting comment. Alex, chicks in college are routinely getting ran through LMAO, all caps. Some of them are, but the average college girl is not getting ran through. The average college girl is studying, is hanging out with her friends, potentially has a boyfriend, maybe has one or two one night stands, right? A few, but then typically winds up dating the second or third guy that she fucks. That's the average college girl. There is a percentage, I don't know what it is, maybe 10, 20, whatever percent, who are having a lot of casual sex, right? They're very promiscuous, right? But again, that's not the majority. The average college girl is not doing that. You're not, when you go to a frat party, you're not seeing the average college girl. You're seeing a small percentage of girls who are into that life, right? But a good percentage of girls, they don't do that. They maybe have wine with their friends, they watch a TV show, maybe they go out here and there, maybe once in a while they have a one-night stand, but it's not something they're doing routinely. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so also related to that, if you look at demographics that have more sex, it actually, individuals from a lower socioeconomic status tend to report having more partners. Being in college is associated with having fewer sexual partners. And also, I think, contrary to what a lot of people believe, women who are more physically attractive also tend to have fewer sexual partners on average than women who are kind of average, mid-range. And so certainly that's consistent with evolutionary psychology as well.
Sorry, can you just say that again?
Sure. So the women who are most, from that part on, so sure. So women who are most physically attractive tend to have fewer partners on average, which is kind of consistent with what we would expect in evolutionary psychology. Why might that be? They can be more selective in mates, and they don't need to use sex in a sort of exchange for a relationship or for investment, so to speak. Whereas sex for women who are slightly less attractive might be the entry into a relationship, into investment from the evolutionary psychology point of view. So, that's kind of what it sees. So, that's something to consider as well, more generally, is that promiscuity isn't evenly distributed across the board. We talked about that at the beginning, like AWOLT and all that, and like difference in social sexuality. But there are differences in socioeconomic status, okay? You can think of stereotypes of people who are more promiscuous. You can look at certain groups where, for example, unwanted pregnancy is much higher than in other groups. Why would that be? Well, they're being more
I don't know if
promiscuous.
that's the best metric, though, because I think maybe people in higher socioeconomic classes have more access to birth control. They're more likely to be on the pill. Is there data specifically that shows that people in lower socioeconomic classes are more promiscuous than higher Like, is there any direct data on that?
Direct data, well, certainly the reports of what people report themselves, and then you have, unwanted pregnancies are one example. But when we talk about in the middle classes having more access to birth control or upper classes, that's true. But at the same time, individuals who are more promiscuous are also less likely to use protection consistently, be that birth control or condoms or whatever the case may be. So you kind of get that effect where
but I just feel like a rich girl who comes from like a rich family, like she's gonna be way more likely like, whoa, you're wearing a condom versus like some like trailer trash type of chick is like, YOLO, fuck it, whatever. No, it's just kind of like a vibe I have. Also, let me just quickly address this. Alex, you must have went to a Christian college. I mean, we all know that's not true. I went to Boston University. I partied a lot. That's back when I used to drink. I was partying a lot. I lived in a frat house my junior year. So I was very much involved in the party scene, okay? I was partying like all the time. I wasn't necessarily getting laid that often because my game was whack. But yeah, I saw that. I talked to the guys. So yeah, I lived in a frat house my junior year. So yeah.
But the issue... I'm super curious. I'd be curious what you think about this playing with fire, Alex. I think a large reason why a lot of men get a really skewed perception of female like promiscuity specifically is because a lot of like these men who are getting dating advice and like taught like things like pickup are going to spaces that are going to again be selection biased to like women that are probably going to be more interested in promiscuity and like more like open sex like type relationships in general, right? Because like a lot of the places that like these men are going and meeting women are going to be specifically like clubs and bars, and specifically they're going to be meeting the women at the clubs and bars who are most likely to actually be interested in going home with them. They're giving more cues of actually like open to like sexual advances, right? And so I wonder if that in part is creating like, this is the issue with anecdotal evidence, right? Anecdotes aren't empty, right? They mean something. The problem is that like based on our own like behavior that we might not be thinking about, it introduces like selections into like what we get exposed to, right? This is why like every Californian liberal is fucking stupid when they talk about conservatives because they've never talked to a conservative in their damn life, right? Everyone who's talked to a California liberal will know this. They'll just start talking about conservatives and you're like, I don't think you've ever spoken to a conservative, right? This is because just by the nature of their geography, they're literally just never exposed to conservatives. So they just kind of eat up what people tell them conservatives are like. And so in many ways, I think like when men are practicing like this cold approach stuff, they're going to spaces where like women are probably going to be slightly more open to being cold approach. It's going to be more successful, which makes sense. But you're also creating a selection bias of the women that you're constantly approaching and the women who are more likely to say yes to you as well.
So what exactly is the question, Kyla?
Do you think that people are creating their own selection bias in their anecdotes, which is why somebody like
100%,
Jackson is believing that like all these girls are ran through, when it's like, no, it's probably just a lot of girls that you're meeting tend to be in like more sexual open spaces because you're meeting them in these spaces.
Yeah, I definitely think that pretty much everyone has some level of selection bias. It may be severe, it may be moderate, it may be mild, but like, yeah, I mean, for sure, 100%. And probably even myself to some extent, I try to really be self-aware and conscious of that. But, people want typically to, it doesn't feel good to question your beliefs and question, especially when those beliefs become like a religion identity, like the red pill has. For a lot of people, the red pill, the black pill, it's not just something they believe. It's literally their ideologies, their identity. Sometimes it's like, fucking religion, right? And so it doesn't feel good to question that. What feels good is to find data that confirms that, right? So that's just like basically human psychology. So for sure, there's definitely a lot of selection bias that's going on. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, again, you see this on Fresh and Fit, you see this on like a lot of podcasts. Like you just dismiss all the evidence of the contrary, and you cherry pick evidence that confirms what you're saying, and then you just find ways to like rationalize, the other things. Like we're seeing this now with like the whole Tate case, right? Like and again, my position on this is like, hey, let's wait for the evidence to come out. I don't know if he's guilty or not, but you see like the hardcore like Tate fanboys. It's like more evidence comes out, they just find a way to backwards rationalize, right? They're not like, oh damn, this is fucking sus, They're like, oh well, this was set up by the Matrix, right? So you see this all the time with like any type of field. I agree with you, Alex. Same for a lot of guys too, but it's a good point that more are using OnlyFans to pay attention. Yeah, so again, just with that, it's less than 1% of women that are on OnlyFans. Like we have to keep that in mind.
Most women on OnlyFans make almost no money. That's like the other funny thing.
But just even in terms of using, it's a very small percentage of women that are OnlyFans. Less than 1%.
Yeah. I mean, women are going to unironically consider being sugar babies and secretly selling their underwear and socks before they're going to probably consider OnlyFans.
Is that actually true?
Yeah, it's definitely a thing that's like talked about. I'm not saying that this is like what women are doing. I'm just saying like OnlyFans for a lot of college girls specifically is pretty high risk because you're attaching your face and your naked body publicly, which could be at any point leaked to future employers. Like OnlyFans is not a super safe option, particularly for women who are going to college and are interested in like professional works afterwards. Like this is a common thing. I remember girls talk about being like, man, it'd be so easy to just do OnlyFans. Too bad, like, there's no way I want my face attached to this stuff. Maybe I'll just sell my like socks and dirty underwear instead. I'm not saying women are actually in like the dirty underwear market. I have no idea. If it is a thing, I wasn't a part of it. So,
Alexander, what is your website?
It is datepsychology.com.
Okay, guys. Yeah, if you're gonna be rewatching this, we're gonna put that in the description. So just text it to Kyla, and then she'll forward it to me, and I'll put it up.
Let me ask you.
Sorry.
Let me ask you a question, Alex, and this is kind of related to what we were discussing. You have been on Tinder for a while, and you have pursued casual sex and that sort of thing. Have you noticed differences in personality from women who will go home with you immediately on the first date, and women that want to have a few dates before, because for me personally, that's something that, if I met someone on Tinder, we meet up and then they will immediately go home with me. Every single time I have noticed this person is kind of different. I'm going to try not to be like stigmatized too much, because extreme promiscuity, that very open sociosexuality, is also correlated with things like personality disorders. Is that something that you have ever noticed and not just for anyone like who will have casual sex, but for the women that you meet who are pretty much immediately ready? I think that's something a lot of people don't realize as well when we're talking about selection bias and that sort of a thing, is that a lot of the time, we're not talking about the girl next door, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a really good question. All right, so let me kind of unpack this. So first of all, I think I have to acknowledge that I have a level of selection bias with this, because my profile is pretty sexual, right? Like there's a shirtless photo of me. I'm not saying explicitly I'm gonna fuck you, but there's like things like BDSM dominant in there, right? So a good percentage of girls are getting screened out right away. The second thing is I typically, if it takes me like more than 2 dates to hook up with a girl, I typically just walk away, right? So I'm not the type of guy that's going to go like 5-6 dates with a girl before sex. It's just like who I am. But there are some things I've noticed. One of the biggest ones that I've noticed is a girl who like fucks you within the first like 5 minutes, right? Like she just like makes it ultra easy, is going to be way less reliable than the girl that it takes you like an hour or 2 hours to fuck. And I think that has to do with the fact that if she fucks you within 5 minutes, then she has like really low standards for casual sex and she's fucking everybody. So it's like, why would she really return to you? There's like 50 other options, like she could because you're the best in bed, but like, you just have such high competition versus if it's a girl who it takes you like hours, 2 hours to fuck, right? The reason it takes you 2 hours is because she is selective. She requires for a guy to fuck on the first night, he has to do this, this, and this. She has a whole bunch of objections you have to get through, and then most guys are not going to be able to get through that, right? So when you fuck a girl who's either on the second date or a girl who takes a while on the first date, like those girls are going to be way more consistent and reliable. I've found. That's just kind of something I observed. In terms of like personality and like character, I mean, if I think about it, like, okay, like I look at my girlfriends. I'm on my 5th relationship now. First girlfriend was a one-night stand. I actually brought her home with me. I met her at a bar, brought her home 15 minutes after we met. Great girl, like awesome, epic human being, engineer at Boeing, like really just like couldn't recommend her like more highly. We're still good friends, like just great person, right? So with her, there was no negatives. Second girl, I met her at a bar. We did not have sex until the second date, right? So the first date, she wasn't down. We had to go on a second date. Second date, we had sex. And even then, it like took a while. We were out like all night. Third girl, Tinder, straight to the house. We had sex within 10 minutes. Also, amazing girl. Like such a good human being. Fourth girl, met her at a bar, got her number, met up on a date, had sex about an hour and a half in. Fifth girl, my current girlfriend, we went on we met on Bumble. We went on a date. She didn't want to come straight over. It took me about like an hour and a half. Got her over. She didn't want to have sex, so we rechecked it. Had sex on the second night. So it seems like and all these girls are great girls. Like all of them are fairly similar. Like I would say they all have a lot of things in common. They're all like sweet, empathetic, kind, nurturing, physically attractive, that sort of thing. So I don't see like a straight up personality pattern. No, when I look at it that way, the only thing I have noticed is a consistency pattern based on how fast we have sex.
This is interesting also. Something else I've noticed. So unlike a lot of people in the Manosphere, you don't really have negative attitudes toward women. You have largely positive attitudes toward women. And also, most of your experiences with women have been pretty positive as well, it seems. You talk about your exes, and you have nothing but good things to say. And that's also a selection bias effect, but kind of a positive one, and a assortative effect. Probably your girlfriends have things in common that that you've just described, traits in common with one another. And probably they have things in common with you as well in that sense, as far as, and I don't mean like things like we share hobbies. I mean like personality traits that you both share. So I think that is also kind of what determines a lot of these relationship and sexual trajectories for individuals. If people start with a very hostile attitude toward women, a lot of the time it doesn't seem to play out very well for them in the end. A lot of the time, all of the men that I've seen who have actually been pretty successful with women, they don't tend to be super negative about women either.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. You can be successful with women and be very negative towards women because that's going to manifest, right? Like so from a pragmatic perspective, purely from a pragmatic perspective, it's helpful to be positive in your attitude towards women. But also, yeah, women are fucking awesome. Like, not all women, right? There's shitty people, but there's also, I think the Manosphere forgets there's shitty men too, right? It's not just shitty women. There's also shitty men. There's a lot of shitty human beings out there, but there's great men and there's great women, right? And if you can screen for that, meet a great girl, that can add a lot of value to your life, yeah, how like, I don't know, man, like, yeah, so when I see like all the fucking hating on women thing, it's like, okay, there's some girls like that and they should be, screened out. But there's a lot of really, really great girls out there. So like being bitter or resentful towards women is not going to help you in any way at all. It's just like, it's purely a disadvantage.
Yeah, precisely. Okay, so kind of related to that. So I did a study with incels fairly recently, and I looked at something called hostile attribution bias. And what is that? Hostile attribution bias is if you're presented with a neutral situation, like someone steps on your toe, do you think like, oh, that was an accident, or they probably didn't mean it, or do you think like they did that on purpose, right? So you see hostility in neutral situations. And that was something associated with not having sex within the past year. Those individuals scored higher in hostile attribution bias. Of course, you see the relationship and you don't know which direction it goes. Do people kind of cockblock themselves because they are very negative in a sense, or do they become that way after many failed relationships or something, you know, it could be bi-directional as well. But certainly there seems to be attitudes like that. And similarly to that, you know, research is very consistent on showing that pro-social behavior, which I say sometimes, and I think people think of like a nice guy, but pro-social behavior is not just like being a nice guy at all, but it is being pro-social, right? Not antisocial. So also is associated with attractiveness to women, with relationship success, and also short-term mating attractiveness as well.
Yeah, like, okay, I know I keep bringing this up a lot during this stream, but like, you take a look at like Fresh and Fit, right? Like, I think me and Myron started at a very similar point. Both were really bad with women, both immigrants, both, you know, probably got bullied a little bit, right? Like, we both started in a very similar point, but we wound up in such different directions. Like, he, you know, hates women, or that's my speculation. I can't prove that. And there was a period of my life where I wouldn't say I ever hated women, but I had, you know, some negative ideas about women that weren't true, right? You know, because I had a lot of pain, you know. I got rejected a lot in high school, rejected a lot in college, right? You know, there's like situations where like, you know, the girl that I liked, you know, instead wound up like dating my friend, right? So I had a lot of pain, right? And so, you know, but my way of like, I kind of moved past the pain. I didn't like keep building on it, right? I moved past it. I realized, okay, I'm no longer that person. I'm no longer that person who was 18 who's being rejected. I'm no longer that person who's like, you know, just really awkward around women. That's not me anymore. And I don't have to keep like playing out this like kind of like revenge type of scenario where I have to like constantly give it back to women. Like, how is that helping me? How is it helping my life? How is it making the world a better place? There's no practical value unless you have a podcast in which you get like a lot of viewers who enjoy you kicking out girls. But aside from that, there's not like any practical value in being bitter and resentful towards women, right? It wasn't helping me. It's not going to help you in your relationship. It's not going to help you get laid. It's not going to help you in terms of your overall happiness, right? So I moved past that, right? And like, I'm at a different point now versus I think like someone like Myron never really moved past that. He's still in the fuck women. I have all this pain around women. And now I'm going to show them who's boss. Now I got this podcast. Now I got this like leverage over them. I'm going to keep constantly proving to them and proving to myself that like these women are trash, right? And it's just like, okay, but how's that helping you? Like, you admitted you've never had a relationship. You seem ultra bitter and salty around women. So it's like, yeah, like I think it's just like how you deal with it. And I just like kind of like moved past it, you know, like a decade ago because I realized it wasn't serving me. I don't know.
Being bitter, not effective for attracting women. Probably the same as reverse, right? Like really bitter women are pretty unattractive as well. Unsurprisingly, being a bitter person is unappealing. And the issue, right, is I'd be curious what you think, Date Psych. I've noticed a very similar energy. You should do the same study, but look at strippers and particularly correlate the hostility rating to strippers and their income. I'd be curious to know if strippers who receive way less income have higher levels of hostility towards men. Because oftentimes I see like very black pill kind of incel energy from strippers towards men in the way that I hear incels talk about women. Because a lot of times, basically, this is my theory. I've just made this up, so feel free to test it. But I've noticed that when you desperately need something from another group and they have access to all of it and you're trying to like vie for attention to receive it from them. So in the case of strippers, it's men's money, right? That are all performing and competing against other strippers to get that guy's dollar. In the case of incels, it's men competing for women for attention and validation and sex and stuff like that. I'd be super, super curious to see if the hostility rates increase as well. Because I very much get the same energy when I listen to like strippers, particularly like unsuccessful strippers, talk about men. It very much maps onto the way that I hear incels talk about women, which is very interesting. Obviously, nobody cares about the way strippers talk about men because men are fun to be mean to and it's totally kosher. But yeah, I'd be super curious.
Who's that question to, Alexander?
Yeah, the scientist.
That would be interesting. You know, that sounds like a study that Ayla would do. Sounds like one of her things. Yeah, that would be very interesting. And certainly, I think a general trend that we're seeing in society now is there is a kind of a subcultures of men that are very hostile toward women, and also there's subcultures of women that are very, very hostile toward men. Both seem super jaded as far as the sexual marketplace goes, as far as dating goes. Neither of those ideologies, if it's from men or women, and I say ideology, what does this boil down to? Disliking the opposite gender. You can't go into a relationship hating men if you're a woman. You can't go into a relationship hating women if you're a man.
Well,
it's not going to get you anywhere.
It's just not going to work out.
I would actually
Yeah.
suggest if you're a woman and you hate men, you're going to be way more successful than a man who hates women. A man who hates women
100%.
is screwed. A woman who hates men is probably still like. There's so many women I know.
Yeah, there's so many guys who will still
dating
who
like
will
super
still-
liberal men, and they'll be like,
yeah.
"White men are the worst." As they're like standing next to their boyfriend, and you're like, question mark? She's like, "Yeah, straight cis white men are the worst," and you're like, "You're dating one. What? What's wrong with you?" So yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I want to answer. Sorry, Alexander, are you done answering that question, or are you
Yeah.
still going? Okay, I just want to answer a few questions. I think we should open up the panel before it gets too late. Okay, Alex, the average woman still has a higher body count than the average man. Yeah, I think that's true. Sure, I'm not denying that. But also, I think we have to keep in mind how statistics are like that. So, for example, with intelligence, right? Men are more likely to be, or let's just say like money, right? Men are more likely to be like ultra rich or like homeless, right? Women are more likely to be in the middle. Of course, there's some women on both sides, but generally, I forget what Kyla, you can just jump in, but whatever that term is, but women tend to be more in the middle, men tend to be on the extremes, right? I think it's exactly like that with body count too. Men, more men are going to be incels, right? They're going to be at the bottom, or some men are going to be, a small percentage of men are going to be hundreds. Women are more likely to be in the middle, right? So,
Yeah.
but I think if we do,
sexual dimorphism is kind of what
yeah, but I think if we do a grand average, like a total average, that yeah, you're right. I think the average woman has like probably a slightly higher body count, or I don't know, whatever it is. This is an interesting point. It's a joke, but there's an element of truth to it. Alex with 10S sub starts whining, complaining, hate on women. That is 100% true. I definitely fucking would. There's a lot of people. My message is not that sexy. My message is kind of boring. It's like, hey, man, if you work on yourself, you get really good photos, you get in shape, you learn game, you do all this, you go through, the pain and hardships of that, then you can get pretty decent results, right? It's not an attractive message. It's much better like, fuck these bitches, they're fucking us over, they took our jobs, like that type of shit. So yeah, I definitely would. And there's some content creators who don't really believe in this like hardcore red pill shit. They just say it for views, right? But like, I'm not going to be one of them. I'd rather have my integrity than, than like fucking, just LARP around for views. But yeah, okay. I think we should. Do you guys have anything to add before we open up the panel?
Nope, go for
Nope.
it.
Ready?
Cool.
I'm
I'm gonna
excited.
drop it. Alex, this is another Alex with 10x. His subs, if he was less agreeable when he's never confrontational. Well, sometimes I am definitely very confrontational. If you look at the Jesse Peterson podcast or some of the Black Pillars ones, debate. But generally speaking, if the person is respectful to me, I'm going to be respectful back to them. I just cannot bring myself to be a dickhead to someone who's just like being respectful towards me, right? Like, just like it's so outside my character. I could just never fucking do that. Like, I don't know. Like, if someone's gonna be a massive dick towards me, yeah, I'll hit them hard. But most people are not dicks to me. Most people are very nice and respectful. And even if I have major disagreements with them, I'm gonna do it in a very nice and respectful way. I don't know. All right, let me drop the link. All right, guys, the link is there, so jump on if you want to talk about anything. Why is there so much focus on debunking red pill? Most people aren't aware of this. You're better off speaking with initiate people and destroying the blueprint grand nows. Well, I do that too. I do that quite often, actually. But yeah, because there's a lot of red pillars who watch my stuff, so I feel like I should give them the right information, point them in the right direction. I constantly go after blue pill narratives too. I mean, I do both. Okay, we got a few people. Let's bring on Angry and Dennis. Would Alex beat Marcus Wolf in a cold approach contest? No chance. Marcus Wolf would definitely win.
So, Alexander, can you tell me a little bit more about what you do?
Sure. So previously I studied research in behavior and cognition. Now I'm doing behavioral and cognitive neuroscience. And I run the date psychology website. I run studies online, short surveys, test new hypotheses. Mostly I'm active on Twitter, posting a lot of research on dating and attractiveness. Those are some of my main interests. I work in a lab right now with physiological responses to faces of loved ones. So research on faces, facial attractiveness.
Yeah, that's awesome. Instead of just like having hypotheses and like, you actually like study the research and like, you come from a place of like having evidence where a lot of people in this field don't. They just like to give like theories and their thoughts.
Yeah, and certainly something as well is, there's a lot that's not known about relationships. There's many, many things that are understudied in that sense. And so kind of what I'm trying to do also is answer the questions maybe that have not been answered yet in research, and also to make those very easily accessible. So running the studies, putting them on the website, no paywalls on a journal or anything like that. People can go and test some novel hypotheses maybe that people haven't looked at. A lot of what I talk about and do is not specifically related to the Manosphere or Red Pill, kind of related to the previous question. But certainly, if you're a man and you're talking about dating, relationships, attractiveness, you're going to intersect with that world inevitably.
Alexander, do you know you kind of look like Littlefinger from Game of Thrones if you just grow out your mustache a little bit?
Yeah, they said that.
That's true.
I think you covered this earlier, but so you think if like a woman has like a higher lay count, she's like more damaged, right? Or not damaged, but it affects them in like negative ways if they have a higher lay count.
Okay, so that's something that I've talked about before. I think when people say this, I think, certainly there's the narrative that having a lot of sex hurts a woman's ability to pair bond. This is something I've looked into a great deal. And I think that probably gets the causality or the direction of the relationship a little bit backwards. Probably there are individual differences in personality that affect predisposition to pair bond. And when I say pair bond, what does that mean? The desire to form a long-term monogamous relationship versus the desire to not form one, or ultimately the ability to maintain a long-term relationship versus not being able to maintain a relationship for a very long time. So I don't think that, for example, people are starting in a pristine state and they're going out and they're having a lot of sex and then it damages them. I think what might actually be happening is that there are certain personality traits that cluster together with promiscuity. So people that might have trouble forming relationships might have more sex over the lifespan. People that might have rockier or more difficult relationships might break up more and end up having more sex, those sorts of things. So rather than sex itself like damaging the brain in some way, I think, unfortunately, and I hate to say it because I don't like to, I don't want to stereotype people for negative behavior, especially for something like promiscuity. But unfortunately, promiscuity does kind of cluster with some traits that are not the most positive or the most promising.
I agree with you. And then another question I have, what are your thoughts on like women's like sexual liberation? You think it's like a net good for society, or you think it's been a net negative for society?
Gosh, it's a hard question, and I'm really bad at like these macro level applications for society. Certainly, the more you start doing research, you focus on tiny little things, and so what does that mean for society overall? Certainly, I think something researching relationships and dating over time has made me more socially conservative, if not politically conservative per se, perhaps more socially conservative about relationships, in the sense that I think that monogamous relationships are probably good for people. When people can form long-term monogamous relationships, when they can get married, not like super young, not like in their teens or something, but like early 20s, if they can stay married, they tend to be happier and all of that. So I think that typically a little bit more socially conservative relationship forms are kind of better. And I wonder if sexual liberation maybe has pulled people away from that. But I'm pretty hesitant to draw any strong conclusions. Certainly, there are people that start from a similar point of view, and they do draw very strong conclusions. An example of that would be Louise Perry, the case against the sexual revolution, for example. So So there's certainly a case to be made that it has had, and certainly, you know, a trade-off. There's been some things, you know, individual liberty is kind of a good in and of itself for men and for women, but that doesn't mean that everyone's decisions are always going to result in the best things for them on an individual or social level.
I have a curveball for Alexander. Kyle, let's tell him about my relationship and see what he thinks.
Okay.
It's going to be interesting. All right, so I'm in what's
With
called
broccoli or your girlfriend?
About what?
With broccoli or with your girlfriend?
Me and Broccoli have an NDA. We don't talk about the things we do. So with Mark, so I'm in a relationship right now. I've been dating this girl for 2 years. We have a one-way open relationship. So that means that sexually, she's exclusive to me, but I am not sexually exclusive to her. We're both emotionally exclusive with each other, but sexually, I have sex with other girls. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, you know, certainly there is a percentage of the population that can engage in these relationships and have no problems. So if we're talking about something like promiscuity or having a lot of partners, and we say this is associated with something negative, we're always talking on averages, you know. There are individuals that can have different forms of like polyamorous relationships and do just fine. Most people seem to not want that. Most people experience a lot of jealousy, even in polyamorous relationships. Usually one partner wants it more than the other. But already from the outset, so you can tell me, for example, already from the outset, you told me like, we have an agreement. This is the structure. So already you're ahead of the game compared to someone that's like, I have a girlfriend, but I cheat on her, you know? So, I mean, it could be, I'm not going to judge it. It's not something that I'm going to say.
The scientist was going to weigh in morally.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that it's like evil or wrong, or that you shouldn't do that or you should do something better. It sounds like you found a relationship structure and pattern that is good for you. It might not be good for everyone else, but if it works for you, it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that okay, when I talk to like red pillars or like people in this community, they fucking bust a nut when they hear about this. When I talk to like hardcore blue pillars and stuff, they get like real like even actually some super hardcore like religious red pillars. They're like, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. Are you even going to have children with her? And I see this with like blue pillars, where they're like, you should be exclusive to her. It's so not fair. You should let her have sex with other guys then too. You know, like this complaint. And then also I see a lot of like really funny conspiracy theories in regards to my relationship. One funny one is that my girlfriend is actually not into it. She's just really worried about losing me, which is like beyond absurd, because my girlfriend is like, I guess it's hard to know this if you don't know her, is like one of the most like straight up like take it or leave it type of people I've ever met. She's like the last person that's gonna like put up with something she doesn't like.
Yeah. Well, you know why that would seem implausible to me is because if women are unhappy in a relationship, they will leave much quicker, you know, much more quickly than a man does. Certainly, people talk about that as far as divorce goes, right? Like they say, women initiate most divorces. We could talk about that too, but you know, women lose interest in relationships more quickly, and women initiate breakups a little bit more, even when it's not a marriage. You know, if a woman isn't happy in a relationship, she will leave. A man will kind of stick around. Maybe he'll cheat, but he's not going to break up as easily. So if she wasn't happy with that, you know, she would leave. The fact that she's sticking around kind of says, you know, she's probably okay with it, right?
So there's like studies on both sides I've seen, so maybe you have like a better answer, have studying like all the surveys and whatnot. Like I think the most depressed group is like women over 30 with like single and just have a career. Like, that's correct.
Yes. So I don't know if it's single career women, but there's
And then
sort
some of the and then some of the happiest women would be women and families.
Yes. So yeah, some of the happiest women are women with families. If you begin to look at women in their late 30s that have a family with or without children, it looks pretty similar. Women in careers a little bit lower, but really where we see this big issue with female happiness right now is in the youngest demographic of women, right? That 18 to 25, 18 to 30. We see this huge surge in like female depression, reports of happiness. If you don't, you can, you know, taking antidepressants and that sort of thing. there's a lot of people trying to explain why is that. Is it because of social media? I think and that sounds kind of like old fashioned, like a boomer, like, oh, the computers are doing it, the video games or whatever. But I think there might actually be a pretty good case that spending a lot of time on a phone on social media could actually be damaging, even perhaps rewiring the brain in a way. But I think that's really where we see the unhappiness in that youngest age group. And there's a lot that's actually very concerning. Alex mentioned this briefly when he said that I think he said that he had a friend that was a doctor, and he would talk to the youngest Zoomers, and he would be like, "There's something not okay with these guys. They're very immature and stuff like that." There's definitely something going on with the youngest cohort of men between 18 and 25, and women. In men you see that in like sexlessness and that sort of thing, and in women you see that as like this surge in depression. But it's kind of like this extended adolescence as well.
Yeah,
Can I weigh in
growing up
if
like
you guys don't mind?
attached to their phone. They're not like actually interacting with people. Like, dude, when I was a kid, like you weren't on your phone. Like you would go out, you would play, you would ride your bike somewhere to a friend's house. You guys would play. That's not really what a lot of them are doing. They're just like fucking on their phone the whole time. But anyway, sorry. What were you gonna say, Angry?
Oh, I was just asking if I could weigh in.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I bought a new mic, so hopefully, like, I'm audible now.
You sound
I
great.
don't have to keep changing the
Crispy.
fucking settings.
Damn, dude, you're
Yeah.
leveling up in life. You got a new mic, new legs. You're
You and Dennis both. Dennis
Don't
is
mention
rich
it.
the fuck out. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Aesthetic
Yeah.
update,
So date psych. I've read all your articles, so I'm
Oh.
kind of. Yeah, I read the one about I think it was called the meme of promiscuity and pair bonding in like July. And I've listened to your conversations with Chad Williamson, Thinking Ape. So I'm really a huge fan, actually. And
Oh, cool.
I've taken a lot away from your work, sort of trying to reconcile, my black pill beliefs with the Evo Psych. So I just had a few questions, if you don't mind. And
Yeah,
also
yeah.
I thought this has been a great conversation between the three of you. So yeah.
Sure. Glad to hear it.
Okay, so all right. So the first one is about sort of what I call the trichotomy of men instead of the dichotomy that is widely known as alpha fucks beta bucks. Now the trichotomy is basically what Alex kind of alluded to. It's basically you have the bottom group that is sexless, and then you have the middle group that I consider beta. I'll explain why. And then the kind of group at the top, which I believe consists of a lot less than 10%. Alex said 10%. I think it's probably like, I don't know, maybe 1 to 5% among the young cohort is sort of the alpha group, right? And the way I differentiate these groups is based on, I guess, the level of investment in order to, gain sexual opportunity. So the bottom group essentially cannot acquire any sex whatsoever, even if they are willing to invest. And that differentiates them from the beta group. They can acquire sex through investment. The top group, the alpha group, is basically these guys on Tinder who can get one night stands or at the frat parties, whatever, athletes, musicians, and they can acquire sex with minimal investment. And I guess the mate switching hypothesis can explain why women are, having sex with these men without investment. And it's not necessarily because they're cheating on their beta partners. It's because they want to try to convince these guys to enter relationships with them and eventually retain them because they wouldn't be willing to have sex with these women otherwise. So sorry if I've been incoherent so far, if this is a tangent, but I was just wondering if you guys could sort of weigh in on what you recommend for men and what path they should follow. Now, from what I've gathered, Erudite is sort of prescribing the incel men at the bottom to try to ascend to the second category, because she's saying, you should go to these co-ed meetings and be pro-social. And that's kind of like a boomer monogamy type of mating strategy, from what I've gathered.
I reject all these characterizations.
Okay, sorry. So
okay.
So basically, again, I don't want to straw man you, but from what I've heard, she's saying, it's possible for these incel guys to get to the beta tier. Again, I don't know. Alex is sort of prescribing this, like, pickup pill, whatever you want to call it. Alex believes you can kind of enter that top echelon of men just by having good game, right? I like Alex. I'm talking about playing with fire. I think this is obviously absurd. I don't think game is really, quantifiable. And then I guess Alex Date Psych, I read your article as well about alphas and betas having better genetics or something than these incels, and that being a beta is nothing to be ashamed of. In one of your articles, you're like, oh, the quarterback's friend still has above average genetics. So do you remember that article? Or
Sure.
Yeah. So do you want to weigh in on that?
Wait,
Sure.
can I quickly go first before I forget? Because I just have two things on my mind. So first of all, I just fundamentally disagree with the characterization that if you're like in that second tier, that you're beta. Like, there's nothing beta about being in a relationship. There's nothing beta about like finding a girl you really, really like and getting into a great relationship and having a family or not having a family, right? So that doesn't make you beta or alpha.
I think this is just semantics. I think we're just like, you just don't like the word, probably. I'm not using it in like.
Well, it's just a completely incorrect like characterization.
I don't think it's incorrect. I just think maybe people have bastardized the term in the manosphere, and maybe you think it's bad, but I don't think there's anything inherently bad with like the way I'm explaining it.
Well, beta is like you're kind of submissive. You don't have strong boundaries. You're just kind of
not really. No, it's just below alpha. That's all it means, right? Like semantically. No,
right. But what is alpha? What is alpha? And alpha is a guy who's a leader, a guy who has boundaries. So what is below that? A guy who doesn't have that. Anyway, I don't want to get into semantics.
Okay, sure, but
okay. Maybe we're just using the word totally differently. The second thing is that I don't think all guys can ascend to the top tier, right? I think that we are somewhat limited by our situation. I think that someone like me who's slightly above average looking was able to ascend in the top tier. Right. I also dedicate massive amounts of time to this shit. But yeah, I think that if you're like really ugly, you're probably not going to go from being an incel to being like a top player unless you achieve massive levels of status. Right. So we are somewhat limited. Right. Everyone can improve, but we do have our potential is limited by our genetics and our situation, our age in life. So yeah, I'm not making.
So Alex, I have a question for you. Sorry. So I guess the two of us, we kind of agree on those like three categories, right? You like, I think it's good that you pointed that out. Now, for men in the bottom group, do you think it's more realistic for them to aim for that second category, or do you still think the incels should try to like jump from the bottom category to the top category?
Well, I think that like it's kind of I wouldn't even look at it that way, in all honesty. I would look at it like, okay, well, what do you want? Do you want to have casual sex? Okay, so go out and have casual sex. Now, look, if it's hard for you to have casual sex because you're not that attractive, just get a few fuck buddies and nice. Like maybe hook up with a few girls here and there. Like, you don't have to have like triple digit body count. Like, why is that like a requirement? You don't need that. And it's like largely unnecessary, in all honesty. This is coming from someone who's done it. And like, I don't regret it, but I don't think going from like 50 to 100 or from 100 to 200, 200 to 400, like really benefit me in any way. Like, I don't care if my body count was cut in half. I wouldn't give a rat's ass. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. So yeah, it's just about, do you have the sex life that you want? So if just getting a few fuck buddies can do the trick, and your body count can be in the double digits, that's totally fine. But yeah, I mean, I think like if you're like not attractive, you're like 5'5", you're an incel, shooting to be like top 0.1% of men is probably not the best strategy, because you're going to be in for disappointment. I wouldn't view it.
But you still think they could be like in the 30th percentile to 90th percentile category? They're like 5'5" or
they can get to double digits. Yeah, sure.
Obviously, you have to work. Obviously, you have to work your way up. Like, if you're an incel, you're not just gonna start having some 10 out of 10 dating. Like, you might have to bang a fatty once or twice. You lost it. Now you're getting some experience, and then you fuck some average girls, get some experience. Then you go to the top tier. Like, you can't skip any steps. You have to work your way up. It's like making money. Like, most people think they can go from 0 to 1,000,000, but like hit 100,000 before you start talking about 1,000,000.
Yeah, Dennis is completely right. Exactly. Like make reasonable goals, accomplish them, and make bigger goals, right? I would never tell a client who's an incel, hey, man, let's work on trying to get you a threesome with like 2/10, right? Let's just focus on losing your virginity, even potentially with a questionably looking girl. Once we get that, let's get you to a point where you're comfortable on dates. Once we get that, let's get you to a point where you can cold approach. Once we get that, and then we just build it up, right? It's like when you're like getting into like working out, you're not going from like, yeah, I'm going to, my goal is to bench 400 pounds, right? You're making small goals, you're accomplishing them, and then you're making bigger goals. And it's the same thing with this.
Like my advice would be like the hardest one is to go from 0 to 1. So my advice would be if you're an incel, just like fuck a really fat girl. Like, you have to start somewhere, and then like once you lose it, lose it, you're not looping on it anymore. Like you spend so much time just like I'm a virgin. So just lose it to like the ugliest girl you can find, or like the best one you can pull, and just get it over with, and then from there you can start building since you have experience.
Fat girls need love too.
I like what you described kind of as the trichotomy. I think certainly a dichotomy of alphas at the top and then like betas at the bottom, because the way betas are described is like men who are completely pathetic, and then alphas are like amazing. But so a more accurate conception of something like this is called the social dominance hierarchy, which is more of a spectrum, right? You have men that are very dominant, high in status. You can also include physical attractiveness in this. People who are very attractive, a little bit less. And then at the bottom, you have people, the low status, low attractiveness, low dominance, social dominance, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so then you have people that are going to struggle along different levels. And then also what Alex said also, a big difference between, let's say, when we say the top 1% of men, how are we defining that? Are we saying men that have a lot of sex?
Partner count?
Yeah. Okay.
So
part of that is going to be gated by your ability to have a lot of sex. But what's going to put a lot of men in that top 1% and in the beta category is just if they want to or not. There's a lot of men who are very attractive, who are high in status, and they got married at 20 years old and they've been married with their wives. In fact, men who are a little bit taller on average, who are a little bit more attractive on average, who have more money on average, who are higher in status, they're all more likely to be married. Whereas the men who have the highest sexual partner count, they typically lower socioeconomic status. You can find people that have criminal records, have higher sexual partner count on average. So it's not always like the best men, not physically, not in status or all of that actually have the highest partner count. But behavior determines that. And the behavior, when I say that, it's like, do you want to have sex with a lot of people, or do you want like a girlfriend?
So maybe the attractiveness of the male's partner should be the metric we use instead of pure body count. What do you think?
Yeah, I do think that would be interesting. And so there's research on the dark triad, for example, which is an antisocial personality construct, right? That consists of psychopathy, narcissism. Exactly. So research on that has indicated, okay, so these individuals are a little bit more attractive to women on average. They also have more sexual partners on average. But when you look at their sexual partners, when you look at their behavior, they also select down in partners. So they have more partners, but they're also selecting women who are less attractive. And they're also, it's also associated with lower status, with crime, having lower income and all of that. So
do you think, sorry. Yeah.
Wait,
do you think if we were controlling for female attractiveness, that attractive women wouldn't favor these dark triad men in short-term hookups?
In short-term, well, it's difficult to say. If you look only at short-term hookups, perhaps they would still emerge as more attractive. But if you looked at something like, well, maybe not. I don't know. It's kind of a difficult question. I would tend to say yes, and one of the reasons for that, as far as explanations, why is the dark triad more attractive? Typically, it's that facet of narcissism that actually seems to do most of the heavy lifting for what is attractive. And why is that? Because they pay more attention to their physical appearance, could be one reason. And also because they appear very competent. So they mimic pro-social traits in that sense. They mimic competence. And so that can make them more attractive, which would also indicate, would they actually do better for men who genuinely are competent, who genuinely are high status, who genuinely are more attractive? Probably not, And I think that's kind of why the dark triad hangs out at the bottom, kind of with less.
I want to add one more thing to that I think you're forgetting. So if you and I were in a fight and you were like trying to fight clean, you know, like no elbows and shit like that, I was willing to fight totally dirty, right? Kick you in the balls, like fucking stuff my gloves. I would have a massive advantage over you when it comes to that fight, right? It's the same thing with Dark Triad, right? Like Dark Triad are using tools that the average guy's not willing to do, right? For ethical reasons, like manipulation, love bombing, all that shit.
You could say what I did was Dark Triad, right? To an extent.
Like, what did you do? What, the operation?
Yeah.
No, there's absolutely nothing Dark Triad about that.
Wait, Dr. Alexander, Angry got leg surgery so he could have his height increased by a couple inches. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm pretty open to surgery and that sort of thing, you know, because certainly I focus a lot on attractiveness, and it plays a very large role. Perhaps if you look at all of the variables, one of the largest roles. So, you know, height, your face, and that sort of a thing. Those matter. You know, they do matter, and I mean, it's a risky surgery, so I'm not going to say like people. Yeah. I'm not going to say like people should do it, especially a very risky surgery, but I'm not going to say it's like bad either. I completely understand the utility. Will that help you dating if you can make yourself taller? Almost certainly a little bit, yeah, to some extent, at the very least, if not a lot.
Well, my response to that, I would say, like, I don't think like, maybe there's probably a list of things you need to work on, right? Like my confidence, like being cool, you know, like controlling my emotions. Like there's a list of things you can work on, and people don't want to do the actual work. They would rather just get like a quick fix surgery. So I think if someone's getting leg increase in surgery, that's like they have a whole lot of other things to work on. That's not like
I generally agree. I mean, I've made this argument to Angry many times, so I don't want to like repeat myself.
If you if you leveled up.
Yeah. What do you think differentiates the you call it the promiscuous 10% or whatever? What do you think differentiates the promiscuous 10% of women from the allegedly 90% who are not promiscuous? Is it like behavioral disorders, or what do you think?
Well, I think you said it's 50-50.
Right? They're innocent until proven guilty, okay?
Certainly, you know, the main trait that kind of describes that is called sociosexuality, which is just a willingness to have sex with a lot of people, you know, and that's a trait that describes that specifically. It's heritable, and it's something that, you know, there's a pretty big difference between men and women. If women had, you know, even just a portion, you know, about 20% of that sociosexuality that the average man does, they would be about as promiscuous as like the, you know, highly promiscuous men. But it's something that you don't see. But aside from that, okay, so that's going to be like the main one that is just like describing like what is it. There's a lot of other traits that go along with that. So for example, you know, borderline personality disorder, all of the cluster B disorders are associated with a little bit higher promiscuity, higher extroversion, you know, which is typically a positive trait associated with a little bit higher promiscuity. Women, you know, men score higher in the dark triad on average, but women who score higher in those traits are also going to be more promiscuous. There are some past early life events. I think sexual abuse is also something that can predict it in the future. So there's a lot of things that can go into, and a lot of them aren't positive, unfortunately, that can go into predicting a future history of promiscuity. And of course, there's a lot of, you know, women that have experienced those things, that have those traits in a greater magnitude, and women that don't. And that's kind of going to explain the difference, you know, between high and low promiscuity, I suppose.
Alexander, could I ask you a really personal question?
Yeah.
If you don't feel comfortable answering this, like, no worries. I'm just curious, like, what is your body count?
No, I don't want to say, because my girlfriend watches this, and I don't tell anyone.
You can put it in the private chat.
So you're in a relationship right now, right?
Yeah, I'm in a relationship.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, just to be clear, just so you guys know, on my stream, if you guys type in the private chat, it still pops up on my screen, so it would still be on the stream. Just so you know, Dennis, in case you like blast nudes in there or something, don't do that, okay?
Are you asking for some?
Maybe later, Dennis.
So speaking of body count,
Dennis is always closing. He never stops. Dennis
Dennis,
be at a funeral.
Your aesthetic update is actually killer, Dennis. You looks like you put on muscle. You got a little chain. I'm digging it. Got a new haircut.
Wow, thank you. I appreciate the compliment.
Next statement: do you like wine?
What? Are you asking
You
me?
like
No,
Him.
you want to come to my romantic balcony?
Maybe if I'm in town. We'll see.
No,
Let me know. I'm in Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
don't get him started, Kyle. Don't get him
But
started.
I have a question for Alexander. So you're probably a fan of Dr. David Buss, I would assume, right?
Oh, sure.
And I believe he said the number one attraction trigger would be status. So would you say like if someone's trying to improve their dating life, they should work on increasing their status, and that would be the best thing they could like instead of getting like some bullshit height increase in surgery, you can like focus on your status, and that will actually like that's the most proven thing to get results.
So I think focusing on status might be maybe like actually kind of one of the first things that you would want to do. And the reason for that is because, probably in this conversation, I'm probably one of the more the black pillar here, although, I wouldn't call myself that, but because personality is very stable over the lifetime. Even when people go to therapy to change their personality and stuff, it doesn't change very much, even like with serious interventions. Changing your physical features, also pretty difficult. What can you reasonably change? So status, perhaps that is something that you can kind of climb the social dominance hierarchy, so to speak. You can go to university. That's something I recommend a lot, because that's one of the biggest status signals, particularly according to David Buss's work, when he did that huge international survey on status. Like 2 of the top 10 predictors of status was like going to a good school and having a college education, income, of course, so having a good job. Those are things I think most people can compete at. Another one of those would be lifting and getting kind of jacked, or at least having like a nice body, because, certainly incels say there's no gym for your face, but there's a gym for your body. You can improve your physique in a reasonable period of time. So physique, status are probably going to be the easiest things to change. Personality, you can shift it a little bit, but unfortunately, the research isn't super promising. It's kind of stable. And if you're someone that has personality disorders, those don't get cured. Those are considered permanent for life. If you are neurodivergent, if you have autism or something, that can make relationships extremely difficult for you. It's not something that gets cured. It's just something that you learn to deal with and kind of work around. So, you couldn't tell someone like you need to work on your autism and not be autistic. You finding solutions to live with that, and maybe in some ways in your life it actually helps you. So maybe it hurts with relationships, but status, yeah, you can. The sky is the limit.
I have major disagreements with like a lot of what you said. So
I'm going to fight you a little bit, Alex. So
okay, so substantial status increase is inaccessible to 99% of people. Okay, like I'm in a very privileged position. I'm a YouTuber. Right? I have subs, and I have had my status once in a while help me get laid. As I grow on YouTube, that will help me more and more. Most people are not YouTubers. They're not influencers, not celebrities, not professional basketball players. They have regular jobs. And climbing just a little bit in your company, like going from being like fucking engineer to being like middle management, is not going to be status that's going to be in any way make a difference in your dating life. So status, again, is something that's really fucking powerful, has a strong effect, inaccessible to the vast, vast majority of men. We're talking about substantial status, okay? Like going to college is not going to give you any kind of substantial status increase. All the other guys she's talking to either went to college or didn't go to college or have it doesn't matter, right? Okay.
I mean, I think it does the college one.
Sorry, what?
I think it does the college one. That will definitely like raise your status.
No, absolutely not. I think it makes grand total of zero difference of whether you went
like
to
college. I see girls respond like if I say, "Oh yeah, I went to this college," or if I say, "Oh no, like." Just a high school graduate, like it's
gonna help because college educated men are much more likely to make a much more increased income because college educated jobs tend to pay more. So that's how it's actually gonna get.
Yeah, in that way. But if you're, that's kind of like not really the factor. It's the money, right? So if you're making money, that's what matters. Okay, a girl is not gonna give a shit if you're making $1 million a year, whether you went to college or not.
Correct, but a girl is going to note that if you have college education, even if you're not making now, you're more likely to be making in the future, which seems to be what girls care about, is stability markers, right? So not markers of stability in and of itself, but cues that you are going to be reliable in the future. So a guy pursuing like a master's she can reasonably presume that he's decently reliable, that he's disciplined, that he's hardworking, and therefore with his higher level education, she can also expect that he's probably going to be a better bet long term as somebody.
I mean, I would argue. I would argue
argument for long-term relationships, but not for short-term casual. I think for casual, the girl doesn't give a fuck whether you went to college or
Yeah,
not.
no, I would argue that
It's about your looks, about your game, about how easy you make it for her. Okay, wait, let me just keep going through a few more of these points, and then I'll let you speak. I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
So I think, like, dude, like, again, I am climbing the status hierarchy right now. I'm gonna see how it plays out. I've already had little tastes of it, right? I'm just really weary of recommending that to other people because I know most of them are not YouTubers and not able to do what I do. They have regular jobs where there's really no chance for like any kind of substantial status. Number two, we're talking
You know where I
about.
went, right, Alex? You know where I went to school?
How would I know?
I went to Trump University.
Okay. Well, congrats, buddy. Second thing is we're talking about looks. The average guy can improve his sexual market value by about 2 points, right? Through fitness, fashion, really good grooming, stuff like that. So yeah, like you're not going to go from being a 3 to being a 10, but you can go from being a 3 to being a 5. You can go from being a 5 to being a 7. You can go from being a 7 to being a 9, right? So the average guy can improve his sexual market value by 2 points, and 2 points is going to make a substantial difference when it comes to your results with women. And the last thing, which I disagree with you fundamentally the most, is this idea that you can change your personality. I guess I think about it a little differently, but when I talk about you can absolutely change your beliefs and your inner and outer game. I used to absolutely fucking suck balls when it came with women. I was so fucking awkward. I had so many negative beliefs, completely different person now. And I have so many stories of that. So you can absolutely level up yourself internally to like literally an infinite level. You can go from being an awkward incel to being someone who's really, really good with women. You can go from having a lot of negative beliefs like, oh, I'm just screwed, or oh, women just don't like me, to fuck yeah, women love me. Of course, why would they not? I'm fucking awesome. You can completely change your inner beliefs. You can completely change your strategy. You can completely change your confidence, your charisma, all of that kind of stuff. So that's the one I probably disagree with the most.
I do think you can change behaviors, and depends on the behavior as well, to such an extent, as you said, that it seems like going from one thing to another, which is a little bit different than like a change in personality traits over the lifetime, or like curing a personality disorder or whatever. It's in a way, it's almost kind of like using affordances to compensate for those and work around them and improve on them. So yeah, I mean, people can get better. That's, a fact of human nature. Even if we say personality doesn't change much, it's stable. People can go from doing very poorly to very good with women, in this case, as you give an example. So I'm not saying that can't help it. So about education, now this is very interesting, because having a low level of education immediately excludes you from the dating pool for a lot of women. This is most of the research on hypergamy, for example, looks at education, and the second amount looks at income. Most of the time when people talk about hypergamy in research, the original research and that sort of thing, it's looking at education. And women, they date laterally or up. They want a man who at least has the same level of education. As a man, you can date down, but if you're working at the McDonald's, you don't have an education, you're going to have a hard time. And this also determines your mating pool assortatively, right? Because if you're in college, you have an education, you're working in a white collar job or in Silicon Valley or whatever the case may be, that's going to be a very different mating pool than if you're working a blue collar job. And no disrespect to any type of worker or anything like that, but say you're working a blue collar job, almost all of your coworkers are going to be male. You're working a white collar job, you're going to have a lot more women. Say you go into the university as an academic, in psychology, for example, 70% of your peers are going to be women. So you're exposed to women much more. So these are things that open up the dating pool, which certainly, you wouldn't say like go into psychology so you can be around a lot of women, but this is kind of what it does. There's research on Tinder as well that uses the same photos and everything, but in one profile, the profile is blank. In the other profile, it just lists the education level, if it's a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. And they did the same with income. So just listing a bachelor's or a master's degree gets about 3 times as many likes for the or swipes or whatever for the exact same profile. So even in Tinder, which is very based on the face,
So what I was
Yeah,
going
real
to
quick.
say, I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
can I just make?
At
I'm
some
comfortable.
point,
Can I
don't
just
know
make
if
a
you're
point?
really,
Can I just make a
really
point?
soft.
Yeah,
Is
go
my
ahead.
mic really
Okay, go
quiet?
ahead.
Is my mic quiet? Am I coming through at all?
Yeah, it's a little quiet, Kyla.
Yeah.
We hear you.
Do you guys just mind if I go after Uncomfortable Truth? I just want to jump in as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I just,
yeah. No, just
okay.
on the education
I'll
point
write
real
down what I
quickly.
want to say so I don't forget. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just on the education point real quickly, I was going to actually agree with Dennis that I think there is a difference, and also partly you, Alexander. If you're a high school grad or an undergraduate, I mean, those are fundamentally different. And I think having a college degree is now table stakes. However, I don't think it makes a difference whether you have a bachelor's degree or any other postgraduate degree. Like at this, in the current day and age, uh, postgraduate degrees are pretty much just bought out with money. Unless you're talking about like the really top Ivy League schools, these schools are so desperate for money, they've essentially eliminated all their prerequisites, right? You don't even have to take the GMAT or GRE to get into 99% of them. So employers know this. I know this because I hire people for my team. Nobody gives a shit about if you have a master's or a PhD. So I think that is the same as a bachelor's degree. All of those are kind of in the same category. Now, if you're a high school graduate compared to someone who's graduated college, I think that does make a difference. Anyway, that was just my 2 cents.
Let me clarify
Let's
something.
let Kyla go because she was next, and then.
Sure. I don't want to derail. If you guys don't mind, Dennis, if you want to go, I'll just jump in. Am I loud enough that I can be heard so that like when I try
You
to
Okay.
are loud
The
and
one
powerful.
thing I'm gonna say is I don't think it matters because obviously like if you qualify and go up to a girl in a bar and say, oh hey, like I went to Harvard, you're qualifying yourself. It looks needy. So I mean, it doesn't really matter for women because you don't even have to bring it up. Like it never really gets brought up. So it doesn't really matter. But what Max was saying about putting you in higher income and putting you around different people, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I just want to make a few points. So, first of all, when we're talking about the college degree and you're likely to do better, is this a correlation or causation? Because we all know that having a college degree is increasing your chance of being financially successful, right? So my speculation is correlation, right? But I don't think there's anything at all inherently about having a bachelor's degree that's going to make you more attractive to women. It's just that if you have a bachelor's degree, you're more likely to be making more money. And if you're making more money, you're more likely to be more attractive to women, right? And I'm not against college degrees. I have a
Yeah.
degree
Well,
myself.
you're going to have a selection bias, right? The type of men who are going to go to school, who are going to be successful enough at school to achieve a bachelor's degree, is already being selected out for IQ and in America, especially income, right? Because they're able to afford school and they're smart enough to get through. And it's also selecting out to some degree, probably some level of impulse disorder. And it's also not that women think about impulse disorder, but impulsiveness. And it's selecting out people, for example, with like really, really high levels of like mental illness, because people with really high mental illness are going to struggle getting through school, which is basically a recipe for mental illness.
Also, we gotta keep in mind that some of the richest billionaires on the planet didn't finish, college. Right?
But I think we can all.
What's this? Let me finish, my man. Let me finish. Okay, so that's the first point I want to make. The second thing is I really, really don't buy the results of that Tinder experiment. I actually think I'm going to recreate it myself because I do a lot of Tinder experiments on this channel. I just fundamentally do not buy the idea that people who listed their college degree got 3 times more matches. But hey, I'm gonna, remain somewhat agnostic on it until I redo the experiment. But I'm just having a really hard time believing that. Maybe I'm wrong, But I can just say with like myself, for example, at some point, I've like fucked around, right? And I've like taken I went to Boston University, pretty prestigious school. I've had it in there, not had it in there, didn't notice a difference. I've like tried putting in like, what happens if I say Harvard? Is that going to make a difference? I haven't seen any kind of really substantial difference. Also, I've noticed I've had clients who have PhDs from prestigious schools and clients who didn't barely finish high school. And I just haven't seen any I've had clients who graduated from a really good school struggling, got clients who just graduate from high school who do well. So I just haven't seen it like just from like a coaching perspective ever play any kind of substantial role.
Yeah, I agree with Alex. If you're trying to like qualify yourself, telling a girl like what you're so educated, like that would turn a girl off. So it never even comes up in conversation. Like I've never had it come up. They might ask you, "Oh, where did you go to college?" But that like rarely happens. So I don't think it matters because like it never comes up in conversation.
Are you dating lots of college educated women, Dennis?
Um,
Like the girls that you're
yeah.
talking about that aren't bringing it up, are they have like bachelors or they're in school right now?
I mean, like I go to bars and I go to nightclubs a lot, so I meet like like people that have careers, older people. Like I met this lawyer that went to Harvard a couple weeks ago, and from anywhere. So it's a range of people. But when you're at the bar, you probably don't go to the bar, but it in my
Definitely been to a
experience, it
bar.
never comes up talking up at like a bar or club.
At a bar, yeah, for sure. I think it's way less likely. However, like I suspect, especially for college educated women, it seems to be a really important thing. Like, and it's a really common thing to come up when you're like having like kind of brief small talk of getting to know each other. Is like, what are you doing, right? And if they're in school, they're going to say I'm in school or whatever. They have some sort of technical degree. And if you say like some sort of job that indicates that doesn't require like a bachelor's of education, I'd be curious to know how much that impacts her perception of the individual. I suspect, to be clear, that there are a lot of things you can do to overcome that. I don't think education's like I'd be curious to see the like study on that one.
I mean,
But yeah,
I'll let you know when I do the experiment. I think it's going to be interesting. I'll try to be as
I
objective
say
as
I
possible.
say
But like,
for short term for like hookups and stuff, no, but for long term it's probably a bit
yeah, for
bad.
long term, I can see how it would play a role. But just this idea that you get more matches on Tinder 3 times for the fact that you went to college, to me, is just like contradicting to every piece of like anecdotal evidence that I've observed and like secondhand evidence. So
all right.
Here's
I want to
something
fight
else.
Alex now. Oh, if you want to go into
Oh.
that more, because I'm going to derail a little bit and fight with you about
Oh yeah,
personality.
just very briefly. So I ran nationally representative statistics from I guess the How Couples Meet and Stay Together database, and I looked at divorce rates by education level. So men and women both without
go
a
down.
college degree get divorced at a much higher rate. Bachelor's degree get divorced a little bit less, master's a little bit less, and PhD a little bit less. So there's a linear relationship between education level and divorce, where the most educated people, men and women both, are the least likely to get divorced. When you have them together in a couple, the lowers the likelihood as well. And assortative mating for education is really, really strong. So most people get into a relationship or a marriage. If it's short term or something, there's probably even an assortative effect just from social class, like what kind of bars you're going to. But most people get in relationships and marry people of the same education level. A very strong assortative effect. So that is kind of a question to ask yourself. For a young man, I suppose, to ask himself, like, should I pursue this? How might it affect relationships down the line? What kind of person might I end up with?
yeah, just like my one last point on this, I think you should go to college because you are pursuing a certain type of career that requires that, like a science field or engineering field. I think for other fields, it's not worth it. For example, like marketing or entrepreneurship. You want to start your own business, you're wasting time in college or
Dead.
stuff like that. Yeah, that's just a waste of time. But for certain fields, it's absolutely like essential. Like you want to be an engineer, go to college. You want to get involved in like a science type field, go to college.
Doctor, lawyer.
Yeah, doctor, lawyer, all of that. Yeah, go to college, right? So I'm not like against college. Like I went to college, I had a partial scholarship, I got like really good grades. So I'm not against that. I just think that like there's a little bit of like a dream that's being sold to like people where it's like, yeah, college, and then a lot of these people, they graduate from college, they're in massive amounts of debt and they're not getting jobs. I've just seen that so many times. So
Yeah, the issue, I mean, that's so much more complicated because now we're talking about like the dream that's being sold with the university is like in the past, it was a really, really good dream. The issue is like with inflation and like the economics and also like kind of the watering down that's occurred in universities and the value of even a bachelor's nowadays. It like is contributing to like all these things being like less and less meaningful. The problem is that like, but this is a whole aside. This is a whole other conversation outside it. I don't think anyone here is saying you should go get a bachelor's so you can pull more women.
Hello. Isn't there like a bit of a risk? Like if you try to attract women by having like a high status and high money, you're going to get women who are very interested in money, and this kind of. I don't think that's not necessarily the pool of women that you want to be focusing on, because like, are you going to be happy in relationship with like women who like first look into your wealth, if that makes sense?
I mean, wouldn't you say like a quality woman would be looking for wealth though?
Well, the issue is like, no, I don't think anyone here is saying that like these women are only looking for wealth. They're looking for stability markers and like capacity to make income is one of those markers, of course, right? Yeah, I would say like if you're dating a woman who's exclusively dating you because you have lots of money and it's clear that there's no other pull for her, that's a really bad relationship. Like, we know what those relationships are. Get your prenup, and like, I wouldn't recommend it personally.
Just
But
don't
we're-
marry
we're-
them in the first place.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
like we're talking about like what women are long-term selecting for, and it's like income is one of them, specifically like capacity to have income, right? The markers of somebody who will be able to make an income.
Right,
But
right.
I think
There are
like,
other ways to show stability as well than income.
Sorry?
There are other ways to show stability as well as income, like in relationships.
I mean,
When it
I
comes to like long-term stability in a household with children, like income is like fundamentally like one of the most important
how
things, right?
else
There's
would
a
you show
threshold.
stability? How else would you show stability?
So it sounds like a social skill. So like when you can notice like what your friends want, what the woman wants, and like solve situations. It's just basic relationship skills. I think those are like very good shows of stability. And like if you want to have a happy relationship, they're quite useful to like kind of just be a nice person. You know, like I think that's a very good sign of like a.
I like the joke that Dave Chappelle has. He had this a while ago. He's like, when I show up to a date, I'm gonna drive a dumpster truck, right? And then like, basically, I'm gonna be like, yeah, you know, I'm a dumpster truck driver. And if a girl's like, ooh, I'm not gonna go on a date with you, he's gonna be like, I'm Dave Chappelle, bitch, right? But like, so, but there's a joke, but there's no truth to it. If you're like a successful guy, I do think it's pretty good not to actually leverage your wealth if you're going for something like serious and meet girls who fuck with you for you. And the fact that you're highly successful can be a nice surprise for her, but I would never ever lead with that. And a lot of guys do lead with that. Wait, quick question for Kyla. I don't know who this person is, but I
I
don't know.
also don't know who this person is.
Oh, you
Talking
don't?
makes it sound present tense. I've talked to Ryan Stone once, and I'm pretty sure the whole conversation I pushed him like pretty hard on basically logical inconsistency. I don't know, so I don't really know. How do I feel about talking to him? I don't know. It happened once. It was kind
Wait,
of
what was hard? What was hard, Erudite?
uh, my dick. I don't know. What do you mean?
I thought you said something. I thought you said something was hard with him. My bad, I misheard.
Oh,
you.
it was like, yeah, sorry. It was like it was hard to like talk with him because he's like he kind of tries to like play like he's like really scientifically informed, but he's not as informed as like I think he would like to be. Yeah. So and it was just difficult because I didn't want to be like super like nasty and mean or anything.
Gotcha. But okay, Kyla. So
That
you
My
said you
time to
were
fight date psych. Yes. All right. We're gonna psych fight. Are you ready for it?
Ready.
Okay.
you want to change gears a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned about things like personality doesn't change. And this is like probably this comes up in like forensic psych all the time. And I get really, really frustrated with my like peers on this one because I think it's a really, really stupid thing that psychologists keep saying around like therapy and change that is like missing the point. Because when we look at things like personality, like the neopie, I'm assuming we're talking about the neopie when we're talking about personality. Is that what you're talking about when you say personality markers?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you mean by neopie?
Yeah, sorry, being technical. The neopie is a personality
I mean,
measurement.
I know, just for the audience. Like,
Yeah,
I know, but for the,
You're a good interviewer. You're keeping me laying flat with the homies. It's a measure of personality that's 5 factors. It's called you can use Ocean, the Ocean personality test. So openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness, and it's a personality factor that measures people on like a scale of 0 to 100.
Hexaco. Okay, hexaco. Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
Dennis, let her finish, my man.
So the neopie, I would agree that we see personality is consistent over time. The issue is that when we're talking about things like self-improvement, even like therapy, like I'll see people say this like therapy doesn't change personality, but in things like relationships, I don't know if personality is the thing that's being goaled at in like dating coaches trying to change. They're not trying to change it. Because personality, while it's normatively predictive, I'm sure you know, is horrible at predicting individuals, right? A highly extroverted person, if you predict whether they're going to like do A or B, knowing their extroversion factor doesn't actually map on super well, right? It's really a better predictor of what large groups of people that have similar traits do. And so in this way, when we're talking about like individual dating coaches, the problem is that like when we use really normative stats, there's some use to it, but it falls apart really hard because the moment we're talking about dating coaching and like dating specifically, we're talking about one individual predicting outcomes with another single individual. And so in this case, right, this is why I'm pretty anti-black pill, is because like things like personality doesn't change, but I'm sure you would agree most mood disorders change, right? Anxiety, depression. And I imagine anxiety and depression are going to be really big things that people call personality, or the way you come across, that are actually highly mobile to change, right? A depressed person's more likely to assume negative things. Same with an anxious person, right? They're going to have that assumption of hostility as well. And so if we see like things like this, like when I hear about the red pill, for example, talking about cold approaching, what I actually hear in my psych brain is basically anxiety flooding, where they're basically exposing them to really highly anxiety provoking things over and over and over with the expectation that it'll actually result. It's crazy flooding because the expectation is the feared thing of rejection will occur 90% of the time. So it's like the highest level of flooding I've ever heard of. It would never get passed in therapy ethics ever. And so this is what a lot of these guys are doing, is they're flooding themselves. So in many ways, I'm not shocked, for example, to see that they're like what they call their game go up, because probably their anxiety is dropping over time really steadily because of this mass amounts of flooding that they're doing. Another thing that we see that would probably be flexible to change, I'm sure you agree, would be things like grit or resilience factors, right? Somebody's capacity to basically maybe have like an internal versus external locus of control. Again, what I see like these red pill types doing, and this is why like to some degree I like kind of believe in what Alex is doing and why I like invest in it, is in many ways it's basically taking like, I'll hear them use like CBT thought challenge lines on each other, which is crazy, right? They would never admit to it because fifis are gross and cringe and beta, but that's what they're doing a lot of times. They're implementing like therapeutic techniques, unironically, in really aggressive ways into their dating practice of like,
I'll admit to it.
Alex will, but that's fair. But a lot of red pillars will cope about it. And there's a lot of other dating coaches that have good techniques, right? Another thing that we do see that changes over time is things like social skills, right? This is like part of what autistic treatment in many ways is teaching people social skills, just teaching people how to read. What are the I remember teaching social skills where like, where does the belly point? That's a really good indication of like where a person's intention and like feelings are. Like if they turn away from you a lot, it's a good cue that they're not interested. And so when we're saying things like, yeah, personality doesn't change, I agree that it doesn't change. The issue is you don't want to marry somebody that doesn't like your personality, because it's not likely to change. But I don't actually think personality factors are the main thing driving people to not find relationships. I think it's all these other things: mental health, grit, social skills, social acuity stuff. And these things are highly flexible to change, right? You can have a pretty unattractive guy who gets really skilled at things like humor, so social acuity, social skills, and becomes very gritty and good at rejection because of like all of the flooding that he does. He's probably going to be highly successful with women because of basically his like therapeutic work that he's put in. Not that he would ever call it therapy, because that's beta and cringe, but yeah. I don't know what you think about that. Sorry,
very good points. No, all very true. Well, kind of what I said before, people can change. Certainly that's a principle of psychology. If not, therapists wouldn't exist, right? The whole thing would be a sham, and it doesn't always work that well. Certain things, anxiety is pretty resilient to treatment, or we do pretty good treating anxiety. Not as good with depression all the time, and some things much better than others. Like a personality disorder is not going to get cured, so to speak, but yeah, you can help people to behave differently and cope with whatever may be kind of limiting them, and get what are essentially behaviorally pretty radical transformations. And on an individual level, like you said, some people are going to do really well and respond really well, and some people are going to flounder and they're not, but saying, talking about from the group, like personality is very stable. Yeah. You pluck an individual out, that tells you nothing. You take an individual, if one individual, it works for one individual and doesn't work for five, I mean, it's still worthwhile doing in that sense. At least you helped someone, so it's not something that when I say personality doesn't change, certainly, I do feel a little black-pilled about it. But at the same time, I wouldn't go so far as to be like, no one should ever try to improve themselves or change, because some people will do really well,
Right. Right. The interesting thing to me is probably the people most motivated to change and taking these things aren't like these typified personality disorders, right? Especially the most resistant one. It's like borderline is a little bit more subject to change. Antisocial PD, like we don't want to do that shit. Convince them to be ethical because it's for their benefit, basically. Right? Those people aren't likely to change, but I suspect part of their issues with treatment modalities itself is convincing antisocial people that they want to change. Because why would they want to? There's not going to be an internal driver. They don't feel guilty. They don't feel empathy or remorse, which borderline people do, right? And so when I look even at like something like PDs, there's very few that I'm willing to just like outright dismiss because the personality isn't going to change. There's this volatility, but that doesn't mean that skills, emotional regulation techniques are going to change. And all of these things are like really, I think, what people are talking about in dating landscapes when they say things like personality, which is why when I read like personality research on dating, I get frustrated because I'm like, this isn't really what anyone cares about. They don't care about like extroversion. They actually care about things like emotional regulation. Like they want to know whether spurgs are successful with women or not. But like science doesn't have a good title for spurgs, right? If you know what spurgs are.
Yeah. No, very good points. Very good points. You know, it's kind of like if someone has a lesion and so then they develop neglect. They can't identify things in one hemisphere and that's not going to improve. And then if you were to just say, well, that's not going to improve, we can't do anything. No one does that. We're going to say, okay, that's not going to improve, but we're going to teach you ways to deal with it, you know? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And who knows, with neuroplasticity in the future and stem cell research, we even might see things like lesion hemisphere disappear.
I agree with you, Erudite, that people can change, and then I agree with you that a lot of people don't want to change. Like, especially I think it's after like 25, most of your like neural pathways are developed. So, but there's always like neuroplasty, so you can always like keep changing them. But the older you get, the harder and harder it's gonna be to change something. So if you like want to make an actual change, in my opinion, like you're definitely gonna have to like go to a different environment and be around different people. Those are like the two biggest things to change. But yeah, unless someone has like painful experiences that wakes them up, like most people don't want to change.
And maybe that's kind of at the core of a personality difference that really is limiting as far as change, because some people they have that initial motivation and perhaps that level of optimism that they say, okay, I'm really struggling. I'm going to go to Alex. I'm going to get some coaching on how to do better. And other people are just like, I don't have the motivation to do it. And I'm super pessimistic about it. And they never even begin the process. And so that's also a personality difference. And how do you put an intervention that precedes that to get them all into the process and keep them on that path? That's very difficult. You know, that's just like some people will never go to therapy, you know?
Yeah, the stigma against therapy, I was just talking to the chat about it, but there's a lot of people who would never go to therapy, and that's fine, that's your prerogative. But there's two reasons you could go to therapy for. One is that you have some kind of problem you're trying to work on, or multiple problems. The two is that you're actually pretty good, but you're trying to level up and optimize further, right? You're trying to go from being a millionaire to a billionaire, stuff like that, right? And therapy can help you figure out what your weak points are and how to work on them. There's different modalities. There's just so many different types of therapists. Some therapists are good, some suck. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't think therapy should be stigmatized. There's nothing. Also, the people who seem to like attack therapy the most are the people who need it the most. Like, I'll see Sneeko, just do 100 push-ups, man. You don't need therapy. This dude's like on the verge of having an emotional breakdown like every fucking stream. Like, I don't know. So it just kind of blows my mind.
But you guys would agree that if someone's trying to change their personality, the two biggest things they can do is change their environment and change the people they're hanging out with.
You know, I've often thought that a radical change in environment is probably one of the best ways to change personality, because personality often shifts with changes in behavior. You know, but personality and behavior, when we talk about them, a lot of the time it's interchangeable. Imagine someone, you know, goes to boot camp in the military, and they're put into this thing that forces them to behave in a different way, and they do that for years, and they come out of that, and that just like sticks with them for life. If you have these really extreme changes in environment, I think that can cause pretty radical shifts in behavior. If people, of course, these are almost involuntary extreme changes, like like you go to the military and then you go to war or something like that. If someone can make those changes gradually in their own life, a little bit more difficult perhaps, but yeah, probably good thing to do. Yeah, change environment.
Okay, let's get, I guess, Skinny Juan. You had a question, then we'll wrap up in the next like 10, 15 minutes.
All right. Can you hear me? How's my audio? I'm using headphones.
You're good.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
So, all right, cool. So, first question. Your chat friend that was in the video with you, the one that you were cock blocking. I heard him say that he's from Colorado. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay, good. That's where I'm from too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so maybe, who knows, maybe I'll run into him at the bars or clubs sometime in our area.
Yeah,
You go on a lot?
Look for him in the chat store.
Dennis, not as much as I used to, because I got a kid to take care of. I'm a single dad, so priorities first,
And you have custody of the kid?
Yeah, it's 50-50.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and second question, Alex, also, I don't remember exactly what stream it was, but like about 2 months ago, I think you told us that you would be open to doing another, like an Omegle video, like a pre-recorded video where you get nothing but good reactions. And then Ganstar followed up with you like a month later, and you said it was coming soon. Is that still true, or do you have other projects lined up before that?
I have many projects. I will drop this video at some point. I've actually already started recording some of it, and I have multiple good reactions already, but I want more. But the issue I'm running into, there's two issues I'm running into. One is that I'm banned off Omegle for whatever God knows reason. So I've been using this thing called the Monkey app, which is fine, but the girls in the Monkey app are really unattractive. So like I have a bunch of good reactions. I'm just like kind of embarrassed to drop it because the girls are like just kind of busted. So I want to get on the app called Azar, which is I hear has a somewhat decent ratio, but you can't really use it on a Mac. So I need to borrow someone's PC, but yeah, I'm gonna get around to it. But it's like definitely not on the top of my list. But yeah, I'll do it. I mean, I personally think it's like a super duper dumb concept. Like, who gives a shit? But yeah, I know the chat wants to see it, so I'll drop it at some point.
J-Rock, would you rather see that, like him on Omega, or would you rather see him like infield at the bar picking up girls? I feel like if you released more infield at the bar picking up girls, like that's more value and that's more interesting, and that like proves the point more,
To be honest, I want to see both. I want to see it all, man. Like, I think the everybody would like to see, him do both. Some people want infield, some people want Omegle.
Well, to be fair, I have a whole bunch of infield out there. They're like the infield part exists. I have dozens and dozens of videos of me picking up girls at bars.
Wait, J-Rock, but are you trying to, like, I feel like a lot of people want to see that video because Alex is just going to get rejected and it's going to be like proof of the black pill. Is that the reason you want to see the video, or why do you want to see it?
No, it doesn't matter to me how he does. If he does good, if he does bad, it doesn't matter. I'm just asking because I'm just trying to follow up with what he said, because 2 months ago he said he'll do it. Ganstar followed up with him a month later, so
Oh yeah. No, I'm still planning on doing it. It's just like kind of low on the priority list, but I'll do it at some point in the near future.
Cool. All right, and one last question. Okay, so like I kind of agreed with you, like when you said that Ganstar was being kind of a chicken for not wanting to do the competition with you in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you told us that the reason that you won't do the Rollo Tomasi debate in Vegas on his turf is because you're worried that he might rig it or something like that. So then I'm starting to think that like.
Do you have any?
I understand the point you're making. So that's like apples and oranges, right? So I'm down to do it anywhere in Vegas besides the studio, right? Rollo Tomasi has a history of lying, especially when it involves me, and so I don't want to do it in his studio. I will do it in any studio in Vegas, any studio anywhere else, right? So that's different. But I'm not saying that we do this competition at my house. I'm saying he can pick any bar. There's hundreds of bars in Miami. We can even go to Fort Lauderdale or West Palm. That's like hundreds and hundreds of bars. You can pick any single bar in there. So I'm not saying we do it in my house. I'm saying we do it at somewhere that's convenient for me because he's not important enough for me to fly out, basically. So yeah, I mean, like, dude, there's so many. Like, I could give him a list of 5 bars, and last minute he picks a bar. I mean, do these guys really think that I can control every single bar in the South Florida area, that I have that much influence, that I can like literally just like fucking get models for every single bar in South Florida? I mean, that's like the most absurd statement ever. Like literally, I'm not even close to that influential. You know,
Wait,
like
Alex, I think
like,
he was
that's like some Vladimir Putin type of shit. I'm nowhere close to that.
I think he was saying he wants like a neutral playing field where you don't have that like in another city.
How would it not be
You
neutral
wouldn't do it
playing
in
field
Chicago
if it's at a random bar that I've never been to?
but I mean, you would still have home turf advantage, and he wants like a completely neutral playing field.
How
I
would
said you guys should. I said you guys should do it in Chicago, and I'll make sure everything's on the up.
Wait, how would I have an advantage if it's a bar I've never been to? I don't understand.
I mean, I'm just telling you what he was saying.
No, I don't give it. But like, can you explain what you mean by that? Because I'm just curious what kind of advantage I have at a bar that.
I mean, obviously, I'm just relaying what Gangstar said. That was
yeah, but Gangstar is a dude who like literally doesn't have a cell phone. Like,
so you're saying you wouldn't go to a neutral place like Las Vegas, Chicago, LA? You would only do it in Florida?
I'm not gonna go out of my way for some dude that is completely irrelevant, who's like literally. You have to keep in mind, okay, with the Rollo debate, I have a good amount I can gain. If I destroy Rollo, I can pick up thousands of his subscribers, right? That's something that's going to be reposted by a whole bunch of content creators, right? So I have a upside. I also have a if I get the sorry, what?
Somebody needs to mute.
Let me. Okay, is this better? Yep.
Yeah.
Just give me one. So I have with the Rollo competition, I have an upside, but I also have a downside, right? If I lose, then he picks up a bunch of my subscribers, right? But it's like kind of like that's something I'm interested in doing because it's something I could win. With the Gangster competition, I have 0 upside. It's only downside. If I win the competition, you think I'm going to pick up any of his like fucking 800 subscribers? 0 chance. Do you think anyone's going to repost that? 0 fucking chance. No one knows who he is. No one gives a shit. The downside is in the tiny 0.01% chance that I lose, that like it's going to cost me my reputation. A whole bunch of people are going to unsubscribe to my channel. So it's a situation where I can only lose. I can't win. And I'm still okay doing that because I'm extremely confident in the fact that I will win. And I think it will be good content. I'm just not going to like fucking go out of my way to do it. I'm not going to fly to a different city for something that literally benefits me 0. And if he wants to do it, he can come. Again, I said we can do it in Fort Lauderdale, West Palm. If I can drive there, I'm down to do it. But yeah, I'm not going to fucking like waste my time on something that literally benefits me 0.
J-Rock, do you have any questions for the guests? You should ask the guest a question. We have 2 really smart people.
Yeah, Dennis and Alex are here. You should ask them questions. Very smart people.
I do not. I just wanted to come and ask Alex those few questions, and all right, that's it. Thanks for answering.
I have another question. I have another question for you, Alexander. What are the studies on like the effects of like watching porn on like brains? Very bad, right?
Oh gosh. So there's a lot of debate on this. This is a very polemicized topic. There are researchers who say basically the research is junk, that there's no effects. And then you have whole organizations that are dedicated specifically to saying, there are effects of porn specifically on the brain that are harmful. Similarly, there's research about porn discussing it in not only the effects on the brain, but what are the implications for sexual function? And certainly there's debate among researchers on that. I don't research it personally myself, porn, so I don't know the research super in depth, but I do understand that there's a lot of debate and controversy, which makes me think perhaps the results aren't that consistent. One thing is for certain, even when there's papers and stuff that say porn is maybe porn is not associated with these bad things, you do have a lot of men who report struggling with porn and having issues with it. And so that's something that has to be considered, that at least there is some cohort of men that say that porn is disrupting their lives in some way, which doesn't mean that it's inherently harmful, but it's also just like benign things can disrupt the lives of people as well, you know, food or behavioral addictions that are not drug addictions, that sort of a thing. At the same time, there's research that indicates like certain interventions, like being a member of the NoFap community may actually make things worse for those men as well. So there's a lot of mixed results.
Why would you say that? I don't understand that argument.
I'm not saying it's what I believe personally, but I'm saying there's been a couple of papers recently that looked at the effects of participation in NoFap communities on kind of life satisfaction outcomes and porn use, and they found that men who struggled with porn, they entered the NoFap communities. After a certain period of time, they actually did worse, like rebounding with porn, and also they reported lower mental well-being following that. Almost like, okay, maybe the porn wasn't good or whatever, but then the community surrounding like stopping the porn perhaps didn't help them in some way, which would be specific to like NoFap. But it's not something that I would like bet my life on is true or not. I'm just saying these are some of the papers that come out relatively recently on that. You know, I would think as far as porn is concerned, I've read papers as well where in relationships, if porn causes problems, it's rarely the actual use of the porn, but it's how the partner views porn. So if you're in a relationship and your wife or your girlfriend doesn't like porn and you're using porn, obvious, that's going to be a problem. If you're using porn a lot and, you know, that sort of thing every day, and you see that it's causing problems in your own life, it almost doesn't even matter, you know, if the research overall says it doesn't do anything or it does. You can see that it might be causing problems for you, and that's something, you know, that might be worth addressing.
Yeah,
Like my opinion.
Can I say something, Dennis?
Can I give my opinion real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Switch topics. My opinion on it is that I think watching porn is like really bad. I mean, it's not really bad, but I think you should not do it. It's very bad. I would say it's like smoking weed, you know, like people think weed is good, but it's just something you like waste your time, and it's just something you like, you know, it makes you numb, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, it's a coping thing to do. Like some people like get drunk because they hate their lives. Some people just watch a bunch of porn and masturbate because they hate their lives. So, and a lot of people want to justify it, but I think it's like an alcoholic drinking alcohol. It's just something to like numb their pain, and something that stops them from taking action. So I think it's very negative, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, so a really good website is yourbrainonporn.com. If you go there and read the articles and watch the videos, there's a lot of scientific evidence. And so go on YouTube and type in porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Even Dr. Oz talked about it. So in my opinion, the research is clear, like porn's pretty bad for you. Now I get it.
Yeah,
If
Kyle,
you're a
take it
man-
easy on porn, okay?
Yeah, like I get it. Like if you're a man, you're gonna watch porn every once in a while. I mean, you're probably not gonna go the rest of your life without watching porn a little bit here and there. But just be careful because the science shows it's pretty bad for you. So
Wasn't it more like a tool? Like they have like science on like your mind on heroin. And it's like, yeah, if you're abusing heroin, that's really bad. But 90% of people who have ever had a surgery have had it like fentanyl and morphine, which are just really pure forms of heroin or stronger heroin. And yet it's not bad for most people, right? Some people will take opiates for 6 weeks to a couple of months at a time to manage pain, and it's not really a problem. Isn't the problem with porn like the addiction then? Isn't the problem with the porn maybe specific types of things? So I could see like the addiction with like mixed like tolerance, that's going to be more of an issue. Like I don't know if I could say beating off the meat 3 times a week to like some pretty standard porn is an issue. But beating off the meat 7 times a day, first of all, I have serious concerns about your zinc levels. But second of all, especially if you're beating off your meat to like increasingly violent porn, right? That might be something that's much more cause for concern.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
so
have
I would say like a few things on that. Like I think that sometimes I think for most people it's probably not going to be like a massive thing. Like for me, like I used to watch porn like like somewhat often when I was younger, and then I started getting laid, and then I stopped watching porn. I just never really had an issue with it. And sometimes once in a blue moon, I'll take a look at like some big titty Latina or whatever. But I've had clients who are not like that. I had a client recently who was like, dude, I literally cannot get a boner. I was like, why do you think that is? He's like, have you gotten, he's like, yeah, my test levels are good. It's because I'm addicted to porn. I watch like 3 or 4 porns a day. So sometimes it can start very like innocent, innocuous, where you're just doing casually, and then it escalates. You start doing it more, and then you start watching crazier shit. Like you start off watching just some regular cheerleader type of stuff. Before you know it, you're watching like Japanese tentacle porn where there's like fucking 20 senseis gang banging one like fucking Japanese chick. So yeah.
Let me give my point to Erudite. So Erudite, I disagree with you. Like I come like in like Alcoholics Anonymous or in like Narcotics Anonymous, they say like 1 is too many and 1,000 is never enough. So basically, it's saying like if you do it once, but even doing it once, like even doing a drug once, it makes you more likely to do it again and again and again. So the best thing would just be stay away from it, so you're not even tempted to like fall into that.
So AA is actually something I'm quite familiar with. I used to work in an addiction center, and even AA will say that what they're talking about with that is addicts specifically. And to be honest, the issue with AA is it's not actually empirically formed. There are lots of people, for example. We lost our science nerd. There are, for example, lots of people that casually consume alcohol all the time. Alcohol is in no way good for you. It's just always bad for your body. It's hard on your liver. It's hard on your brain. There are basically no positive effects of ingesting alcohol. The only positive of alcohol is it's antibacterial for like your skin and stuff. And even that's harsh and drying.
And there's no positive effects of watching porn.
Yeah, but the issue is that like you can have like casual use and consumption of these things, and it's not really overall negative because like the damage done on alcohol from alcohol with like really casual consumption is mostly mitigated by the liver, right? Your liver can basically clean it all out. It's not going to lead to like major damage. You're probably not going to die early because you had like a couple of like glasses of wine, even 5 times a week. The issue with alcohol is binge drinking and alcoholism.
Erudite. So if you come from the addiction background, I do as well. So you understand it's like a progressive disease. Like it gets worse and worse. Like you might start with 1 or 2 shots, but then you need like 3 shots, 4 shots, 5 shots. Doing it more often. The same thing is with porn. So
the issue is what you're talking about is a addictive, like an addictive pathology, right? Where you're building this tolerance because you're trying to pursue the same high.
Even with normal people, they might like watch porn for a minute or 2, but then next time they're going to watch it for 5 minutes, and then it builds from there. Like even normal people do that.
So the dangerous thing with tolerance for addicts, for example, I'm sure you would know, is that your tolerance goes away after a pretty small amount of time. This is why addicts, for example, who have detoxed off of heroin and have been clean for 10 days, when they leave detox centers, the staff will tell them the next time you must use a lower dose than your regular dose because you don't have tolerance anymore. I suspect it's very similar with with anything. You can become addicted to these things, but most people don't become addicted to it.
So,
the people who become addicted, the problem isn't the porn, the problem isn't the alcohol, the problem is the addiction.
So
no, Erudite, I agree and disagree with that.
Let's go to Vikram, and then maybe we'll just do closing statements because I do want to.
Can I get you recommend it to people like it's a good thing, or can I get your position? Do you recommend it to people to watch porn, or like what's your position? You recommend it?
I think it's wholly neutral, but I don't tend to recommend neutral things, right? I just would say it's fine. I recommend healthy things, right? So like healthy things, for example, would be like exercising. I think porn consumption is pretty neutral. I think if consuming porn is preventing you from going out and hitting up girls, which it seems to be some evidence that that's the case, that's probably a bad thing. But it's not because of porn, it's because you're using porn to avoid your actual problem, which is like having success with women, right? But yeah, I mean, if you're consuming like pretty like reasonable porn and you're just like masturbating to like keep your horniness levels in check, I don't know. I think that's like neutral. It's fine.
The one thing I would say on this, like this may be a little TMI, but like even with myself, like, and I'm like highly disciplined, highly motivated. I prefer not to have sex with my girlfriend until like I'm about to go to bed. Because if we have sex at like 11 p.m., like I feel like for the rest of the evening, I'm like a little bit less motivated. It takes a little bit more willpower for me to get through what I'm trying to do. So I prefer like to like keep that sexual energy until I'm done with all my work, and then like right before bed have sex. So like. And that's like kind of one of the things we like sometimes bicker about because she likes to go to bed a lot earlier than me. And so like, so yeah, like, so I don't know, like I do notice like with me personally, like it doesn't like, I don't know, it's not like massive difference, but again, I don't have an addictive personality, but it does make me a little bit more apathetic, a little bit more like kind of lazy, a little bit more like just tired. I don't know.
But
I just want to say on this subject.
Can I just respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Victor. Go ahead.
I was going to say about firstly about your brain on porn. The science in it, the research is really questionable. Like the experts actually don't agree with it. Like it's really controversial. Like, a lot of the data on it is just not. It's not actually as scientific as they make it out to be. But I feel like porn is just as addictive as anything else. Like the same way that you guys were talking about how like, oh, you'll watch like, some basic porn and then you'll go on to watch more extreme stuff. Maybe you could say that about Alex's content. Maybe some guy will spend every day watching Playing with Fire, and then next thing you know, he goes on to watch Fresh and Fit, and the next thing you know, he goes to watch Roller Tomasi or something. It's just like,
as long as you don't jerk off to my content.
You think that's equal to watching porn all day?
No, I mean, no,
pipeline.
yeah, the Roller Tomasi pipeline. No, I feel like it's fine if you do it in moderation. As the data shows, it's fine. There's nothing. But if you're spending all your day jerking off, the problem isn't that you're jerking off; it's that you have nothing else to do all day. Like, yeah. But
I know. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, sure, there's those guys probably on average have less to do, but some of the people who are addicted to porn are actually highly successful people who run businesses, who who are like high functioning CEOs, and so yeah, that's not necessarily always the case.
But
yeah,
Alex,
the biggest problems with porn though is that everybody has an iPhone. Like this is a big problem with children too. Everybody has an iPhone. So porn is like Erudite, you brought up heroin, but the thing is like porn is way more accessible and it's free. Everybody has an iPhone. You can just go on Pornhub for free. So it's like porn addiction is really out of control for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it is. The issue is like heroin's probably more addicting than porn, right? Because it like releases dopamine in your brain and stuff like that. So like I agree. These are different types of addictions, and probably like the way that you get treatment is going to be different, because with heroin, well, like preventing you from going into spaces where heroin is going to be available is going to be different than porn where it's everywhere, right? But that doesn't change that it's still an addiction pathway that we're talking about here, right? We're not saying, like, this is why I'm saying the porn isn't the problem. It's the addiction that's the problem. And I would say porn that's like the really violent, like scary shit that's like on like dark.
Yeah, of course. I want to say too, like porn is not natural. That's another myth. It gets brought up all the time that porn is natural. No, like high definition video pornography on iPhones has not been around since the beginning of time. It's like very powerful. Like way back in the day, you would just have your imagination. You might think of something in your head, or maybe you'd have pictures. I mean, Playboy came out. Those were just photos. But look into the science. The high definition video porn is like 1,000 times more powerful. Releases way more dopamine, way more addictive. So just look into it.
I'll just say this, like kind of anecdotal, but I've been doing NoFap, like not religiously. Like sometimes, there's a cute girl, maybe I'll jerk off with her, but masturbate with her or whatever. But I've been semi-religiously doing it for like about 7-8 years, and I highly recommend it. For myself, it's been highly beneficial. I feel like, again, it makes me more motivated. When I was actively going through my pickup phase, it was like, because think about it, like you're out at a bar, maybe you got like a few rejections, you're kind of discouraged, and it's like you're like, oh, whatever, I'm just gonna go home and jerk off to the girl that rejected me, whatever, on Pornhub. Or it's like, hey, listen, the only way I'm coming tonight is if I bring a girl home. if I want to bust a nut, I have to keep going, right? So I think it's all about like incentives and disincentives, and like you want to stack the incentives in your favor, to kind of get the outcome that you want. So yeah, I mean, again, I don't think it's like a big deal if you watch porn as long as you're not addicted to it, but I think there are benefits to doing that.
And
Alex,
Alex, I
one
had a
more.
question for you on that. Is it any different than social media? Like if someone spends all day on social media?
Yes and no. I think that spending all day on social media is also really bad. I don't advocate that. Like me personally, I don't own a television. You see one back, but this just came to the apartment. I don't actually use that. I don't watch television at all. So yeah, I think that spending time on social media is not good. The one thing that I would say that's different is that like spending time on social media doesn't take away your sex drive like jerking off to porn does, and also it's not going to give you erectile dysfunction like porn potentially could. So I think in some ways, porn is maybe potentially worse, but there's a lot of overlap.
Alex, I have a question. You would agree that watching porn is like a progressive thing. Like at first you might watch like it for like a couple of
Oh,
minutes, one video, and then like you keep doing it and you're watching it for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you're clicking on more videos. So you would agree like it's a
yeah, that's a
progressive.
commonly observed phenomenon is that you get into like weirder and weirder shit.
Yeah, it's the same with like addiction too. Like if you pop a pill, you're gonna pop it once. And so I think the best advice would be like stay away from it so you don't even have the chance of getting addicted,
Well,
and
it's
you
the
don't
most
even have a
conservative
bad.
advice, right? It's the same advice we'd give of like probably don't have sex until you're married because there's a lot of really risky things that can happen when you're having sex with people that you're not regularly committed to. Or the same advice that we'd say like probably never drink or never do drugs, right? The problem is that people don't like that advice. They don't take it. They're not interested in it, right? So what you have to talk about is what are reasonable and healthy ways to consume things that can be negative for you, right? And I think that's what we have to talk about when it comes to porn.
I just
And
feel like a lot of
regarding
people.
sorry, I
I
was
just
just
Well,
feel
I
like
think
a
it,
lot.
I think it also comes down to like your goals and what you're trying to accomplish. Like for example, I eat really healthy, and a lot of people who eat paleo they have a cheat day, right? Like The Rock talks about it, like, oh, here's my cheat day, right? Like I personally don't believe in cheat days. Like I have zero cheat days because I find that if I have one cheat day, I'm gonna be tempted to have a second cheat day, right? And it's like, oh, I'm having a really bad day today. Let me do a premature cheat day, right? So I personally operate better by having a like all or nothing type of mindset where it's like no cheat days. I'm always eating healthy. But yeah, if you're someone that's like some people are different. Some people are totally good at managing cheat days. So if you can make a hard rule for yourself, hey, I'm only going to watch porn like once or twice a week. I think that's cool. I just think a lot of
The,
people struggle with that.
and
the
I
way
wanted to
I
respond
see
to the
it
point
is
about
the
I just
last
wanted to
thing I
respond like, to the point about erectile dysfunction. That's only a thing if you're gripping yourself too hard, like if you're doing the death grip
No, that's not
syndrome.
true.
I don't think
Like,
that's true, Vikram.
I mean, you can
yeah
look it up, but like if you even try
misinformation.
to keep your
Vikram,
grip
Vikram, I
soft,
can tell, or I'll let you finish, and then I'll respond. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, all I want to say, yeah, if you're chill about it, it shouldn't be a problem. Sorry.
The last thing I wanted to say about it is like I think the way I see it is people are lying to themselves. So like obviously I'm smoking weed. Like I know that's a bad thing. I know my life would be better if I didn't
I don't
smoke
think
weed.
it's bad. I smoke
It's the
weed.
same with porn. I mean, I'm saying it's the same with porn. Like obviously your life would be a lot better if you stopped watching it. So people just need to be honest with themselves and stop coping. Like people just
Yeah, I
love
mean,
to justify
I
the
tend to
bad
agree with
habits.
Dennis on this one because it's like you can make the argument, oh, if I just watch porn once a week, it's fine. I actually think that's like even once a week is pretty damaging because porn is not natural. So that's what I fall back on. Like porn's
What does
not
that
natural.
mean?
There's not like a need to watch it.
Yeah, but we
It
do lots of
means
things that are
You're
not
saying it's
natural.
not natural, right?
one
I
in
Like
mean,
all
two
kinds of
all of
million.
us
stuff is
being
not
here on the
natural.
internet right now is not natural. But I don't think we'd say that it's
But
inherently
it's not
bad.
harmful.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, just because it's not natural doesn't mean it's harmful. You're
Yeah,
like
but
saying
I'm
like it's
saying
not natural
look
in a
into
way
the
to
science
imply that
of
it's bad.
look into the science of watching porn. I mean, based on what I know, this is like saying maybe you just smoke crack once a week. Okay, I wouldn't smoke crack even once a week. I wouldn't do it at all. But I'm saying look into the science. Go to yourbrainonporn.com. Look
You're
up
missing out,
porn-induced
bro.
erectile
Crap
dysfunction.
is awesome.
But this is
Your
what we're
brain
saying,
on
Brad.
porn is not
They've
scientific.
already
It's
said-
debunked already.
Reckham has already pointed out like serious the site is known for having major methodological errors, and even Alexander, who's probably way more in the literature than probably anyone else on this panel, has said it's really, really mixed results. There's some really, really strong groups that are very, in many ways, motivated to prove that porn is bad, that are showing negative effects of porn, and then there's more neutral groups that seem to be showing like much more mixed results about the effects of porn. Probably some porn is bad for you. Probably increasing, escalating violence of porn is probably bad for you. Consuming child porn is probably not a super good thing, right?
Also
That's
highly illegal.
Also highly illegal, right? Getting addicted to porn is probably not
Yeah.
good for you. But again, like
So
none of these things are because of porn itself. This is unironically kind of the argument that lots of people would make for like why guns are bad, is because like guns can be used for bad things. Well, guns are tools. Porn is just kind of another like tool, more or less. It's just a thing.
You and Alice can both agree that people use it to cope, and if someone just stopped watching porn, their life would improve and be better. You guys can agree with that.
Maybe,
No,
but maybe
not
that's the thing
everyone
with
is
keeping them from
I mean,
killing themselves.
I don't think that porn viewing is 100% because of someone's coping, right? I mean, sometimes it's like, you just have a sexual need. Like, Brad, on your point on it being unnatural or natural, right? I don't think, like, Alex was showing that graph earlier about men having less sex than they've ever had before, right? It's not natural for men to have sex like once every several years either. So there has to be an outlet to get rid of that sexual tension. And I think in moderation, it could be fine. I think overall, right, if you can abstain from it and it not affect your life, right, there are well-studied benefits of NoFap, right, increase in testosterone, management of dopamine levels, things like that. But in general, right, I think a good rule of thumb is if abstaining from device is causing another harmful or deleterious effect on your life, then just do it. It's like, do it once in a while. It's fine. Like, for example, if you're doing, like I did keto for once, right? And at a certain point, it was like, I'm getting so hungry and I have to like focus on everything that I'm eating and my macros. And it was taking away from my ability to focus on other things. So if it's reaching that point, right, it's fine to just do it once in a while. I mean, like if you're getting addicted to it, of course, and it becomes a vice, it messes with your dopamine levels, right? You're losing zinc and vitamin B and iron and different things. But I don't think it's necessarily a horrible thing done in moderation.
Yeah, let me just comment on that. Oh, sorry. Let me just go and then it's all you, Alexander. So I generally agree with that. For certain people, you are right. For some people, even in moderation, it's not good. But for some people, in moderation, totally fine. No issue. Right? And I was one of those people. For me, like watching porn when I was like younger, like didn't fuck me up in any way. I never had any kind of erectile dysfunction or anything like that.
But Alex, what kind of porn was available when you were younger? Because this is a different generation now.
I was watching some fucked up shit.
And
I'll leave it at that. Nothing illegal, dude. Yeah.
Just to respond to that.
I just think it's a very, it's like.
Let me just finish the point. I was just about to say, I do think there's actually a semi-productive way to use porn, and that's when you have a date. Right. This is not like something you're gonna do if you're like advanced, but if you're just kind of nervous around girls, you're beginning the game, you're having a hard time sexualized, you have a date, and like for example, you meet the girl in 20 minutes, watch a video of a girl who looks like her, like getting fucked, and then that's gonna put like a very sexual image in your head. So you're gonna be in like a very sexual state. So I used to do that all the time before dates when I was kind of getting into game. That's like a little, I don't know, that's a little programming.
Yeah. So I agree with that, I don't really hear anybody talk about this, but I think probably the best way to use porn is like hardly ever watch it. Just watch it maybe once a week or once a month, but don't jack off to it. Just watch it. Because the science, from what I've seen, the science shows most of the harm comes from actually jacking off to it.
Yeah, just watch my porn.
I'm serious. I can't. I've done my research. Maybe I'm wrong, but I can't like.
But you're citing that website. That's very.
I know, but like all the articles and all the videos, I can't like sum them all up right now. I'm just saying it's a lot of articles and videos.
That porn is neutral or good for you?
I mean,
that is neutral. Well, the important thing to know though is
that if you just watch porn and you don't masturbate, just the viewing of the pornography can increase your testosterone levels by 10 to 15% in the short term for like
very short term.
Very short term.
Very short term. Yeah.
Let's
Um,
let
I know
Alexander go because he was about to make a statement. Then we'll go Vikram, Brad, and then we'll just wrap up.
Sure. So something, if you look in the diagnostic and statistical, the diagnostic manual for in the
Diagnosis
DSM, exactly for diagnosing disorders, how do you distinguish between something like normal alcohol use and alcoholism, or like recreational marijuana use and marijuana use or addiction disorder? And one of the diagnostic criteria across all of the addictive disorders is a behavioral criteria. Basically, is it causing problems in your life? And the use of pornography similarly. So we see some men say, I don't have a problem. I've never had a problem. I don't use it that much. It's not. And then you have other people that are like, even a little bit of use throws me off. It's causing a problem for me. I think it's pretty bad. And so the two aren't actually incompatible positions, because that's kind of the way that addictions work, right? Is that some people can smoke a joint once a week and they're fine. Some people smoke a joint and they can't stop, and they're smoking every day, right? And more and more research has accumulated. I think that marijuana is probably a little bit worse than maybe people thought, in the early 2000s or the early 90s. It's probably pretty benign as far as addictions go. But, smoking weed all day, every day is probably not great for you. And it's probably the same case with porn, that doing it all day, every day is not great for you. And there's probably individual differences and variation, that some people might just want to look at some vanilla porn once a week, and that's not going to do anything harmful to them. And other people are going to watch it once a week, and then they're going to watch it the next day. And then they're going to start watching more violent porn, or they're going to be jacking off like 5 times a day. And that's what's interesting about porn, is some of you mentioned as well, is that when you look at anything that stimulates reward in the brain, the reward centers are pretty similar, but with porn, you also have kind of a physical response that compounds that. And someone mentioned like the death grip. So then you also have that physiological thing that could also contribute. Porn might do it independently with or without the death grip, but then you still have something else physiological on top of that could contribute to erectile dysfunction even more. So you've got a lot of strange things going on with porn, multiple variables that come together that can make it potentially more harmful for some people, more addictive for some people than for others, depending on the use, what they're viewing, their own personality and tendency toward addiction. I would think, if anyone is saying they had a problem with porn and that they were struggling with it, I would never show them a study and be like, no, it's safe, look at the study, because it could be safe in general, and still some people could have a really hard time with it, kind of like alcohol. A lot of people, have a hard time with it, even if it's safe kind of for most people on average, or marijuana, or whatever the case may be.
I'm just thinking what the death grip is. It's like, I got my dick. Like you ain't going anywhere, fucking penis. Like, what the fuck is that?
Well, and we also can't discount the personal testimony, right? Whenever it comes to these things, there's the science that you can objectively measure. Then there's also personal testimony. So if there's, thousands of men all over the internet reporting that they watch porn and they have erectile dysfunction, they can't get hard for their girlfriend, they're not interested in real women anymore, these kind of things, then we have to also account for that.
Sure, but let's just be clear when we're framing this conversation. Nobody on this panel has said porn is always good, there's never a problem. There's the two sides have been some people saying there's a reality of addiction for some people. For those people, it's very real and it's a problem, and that's legitimate. The problem is not all porn use is bad, and we should just assume porn bad. The other side is saying
I think all porn use is bad.
Yes,
no, I'm kind of more on the other team where I'm kind of in the middle, but I don't think all porn use is bad.
I kind of think of it like this. It's like, are Oreos ever good for you? No, they're never good for you. I know they're never good for you, but between now and when I die, I will eat Oreos, every once in a while. But would I be missing out if I never ate Oreos again? No, my life would be way better.
Yeah, I see it on the same level of smoking weed. Like, smoking weed is never gonna make your life better. Watching porn is never gonna make your life better. It's just a cope and an escape.
That's not true. Smoking weed can make your life better. Like, I have a sleeping issue. Smoking weed allows me to fall asleep. I get much better sleep if I smoke weed. Sex
Do you
is
think that, or is that your rationalization of why you use so much?
No, I'm not addicted to weed. I never smoke it during the daytime or the evening time. I only smoke it for sleep. I have a really hard time sleeping. I've always had, and weed is one of the. It's a natural thing. Allows me to sleep. It's better than Ambien or like any of those.
Okay, but for most people, smoking weed would never improve their life. For most people, watching porn is never gonna improve their life.
No, but
For
like
most people,
otherwise,
it'll be just dead neutral, right?
like
I smoke weed sometimes, and I'm going to tell you right now, sex on weed is phenomenal, especially if there's lots of CBT.
yes,
Really good
I was
body
just
high.
about to say that.
There's nothing like it except for
Yeah.
if you drop like acid or something like that.
Yes, yes,
It's
yes.
fucking
Let
wild,
me-
okay?
It makes
That
sense.
vastly improved my life, but
Like
sex on
20
weed
times
is good.
better. Yeah, you're right.
That's
100%.
crazy. It's crazy.
I just
But
think there's not.
it's mostly neutral. Like most of the time when I smoke weed and we're hanging out with friends, like reality, like I'm not addicted. I smoke weed probably like max once a month. I don't know. It's just like not that big of a deal. But for the people, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal, and that sucks. That's rough.
Yeah, I mean, Dennis, I tend to agree that there are many benefits of NoFap, but I think that if you're genetically predisposed to addiction, then you should avoid all vices, right? And that goes with alcohol, gambling, whatever, smoking, vaping. But it's like some of these vices, they have benefits that are harmful. I mean, they're harmful to you, but they can benefit you in other ways. So, for example, if you're abstaining from alcohol, but you're abstaining from it so much that you're not going out and you're not interacting with friends, where you kind of have to weigh the trade-offs, right? Is it worth it to drink maybe one beer or something and hang out with your friends, or just stay home? So there, you have to weigh the social implications as well. It's not just, just based on the vice itself, of course, right? It's not going to be great for you, but I don't think that that's the entirety of of the equation.
I just think there's way too much emphasis on like, oh yeah, it's healthy, like this and that, it's normal, and I think there should be
Probably.
more emphasis on
There's
it's
definitely a
bad for you.
romanticization of drugs, for sure. I'd agree with that.
And I think like you should do things that will make your life better. Like instead of watching porn, you should actually go out and like to a bar or a club and interact with women. I feel like
Yeah,
that's a
or watch the
very
PWF
Yeah,
channel.
but sometimes you're bored and you got an itch, and apparently I actually never watch porn, but sometimes you're bored, you got an itch, you've only got like 20 minutes, you're not gonna go out to a bar. You're just like, I'm kind of bored and I'm kind of horny. I don't know. I think it's fine.
Yeah, and some people have trouble sleeping, right? And it's like they can't sleep until they just, they have to get rid of that nervous energy, and so that's what they do. Like, there are use cases for it, right? I mean, I agree that it's not the best thing, just like alcohol isn't the best thing, or smoking weed, or any of these vices. But used in moderation, it has its uses.
Yeah, let's
I'm
start
just trying
wrapping
to
up.
say not all the vices are equal though. Like they're not all on the same level. That's what I'm
Murdering
trying.
people
Like
is way
Yeah,
worse. than weed.
murdering people probably not the best idea. All right, let's quickly do closing thoughts, and then let's wrap up. My closing thoughts. Fun discussion. Thank you for coming on, Alexander. I think this was a much more of like an intellectual type of discussion, which obviously is going to get way less views than like a argument shit show. But I enjoy these streams. I think we cover a lot more interesting stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. All right, let's go to Kyla.
Skip.
All right. Skip Kyla. Dennis.
Thanks for having me on, Alex. I think it was a really good discussion. I'm gonna have to look into more of your work, Alexander. You seem like a knowledgeable guy, and I like that you have studies to pull from, and it's not just you like in your mom's basement, like just theorizing about women. You have actual studies.
Yeah,
So I'll make
he's
sure to.
broadcasting from prison.
Sure. So I'll make sure to check out your stuff, and then if you guys want to check out my stuff, I released a new like nightclub magic video today, so that's on my channel, Dennis Wynn. I do magic in the nightclub with hot girls, so I released a new video. Check it out if you want.
Only because I like you, Dennis. I'm going to let you get away with the self-promoting. All right, Vikram.
Don't worry, I'm not gonna do that.
No, you can. I like you too, so go for it.
Yeah, I was gonna say regarding my only point was that the actual science does not agree with your brain on porn. Your brain on porn has been debunked by the experts many times. But overall, like it's just as addictive as watching Alex all day, or like watching too much of Alex or whatever. So long as and also I feel like a lot of people, instead of maybe they suffer with depression or whatever, but they put it in the porn. well, it's the other way around. You're watching too much porn because you're depressed. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say. And yeah, I will be having a debate with a feminist who's like friends with Destiny. Her name is Straighterade. I think she was on Fresh and Fit. Yeah, if you guys want to check it out, check out my YouTube channel, Vic's Life, VIKSLIFE.
Can you send me a link to that, Vic? I want to check it out.
Yeah, what are you debating about?
You didn't want to link to mine, Alex?
You can, yeah, I like you. You can plug your shit.
You didn't ask for a link though. You asked him for a link. It's okay. I'm joking.
Well, I'm just curious, like, about that debate. All right, Brad.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone on the panel. Thank you to Alex. I think this intelligent conversation is way better than a bunch of drama and screaming and he said, she
Not in
said,
terms of views,
bullshit.
but you know.
Yeah, well, you know, quality over quantity. But yeah, as far as like this whole thing about vices, I would just say, you know, look into the science. Your brain on porn is very legitimate, despite what Vikram says. And I would just say, you know, not all vices are equal. Like you can't put them all in the same level, in the same category. And don't underestimate certain drugs or vices. You know, there's certain things that are so powerful and have so much potential for destruction. You know, just stay away. That's all I'll say.
Uncomfortable truth.
Yeah, good discussion. I would actually argue that it's not porn per se that's the most harmful. I think it's the masturbation portion that's actually harmful. I think the whole idea of if you watch too much porn, your idea of realistic sexual expectations and things like that, I think that's very overplayed, and that's just a load of bullshit, to be honest. But I think that if you over masturbate, you're losing nutrients, right? There's a loss of testosterone, at least temporarily, that goes back after a couple of days, and then potentially a loss of libido, potentially a loss of nerve function, right? If you're gripping too hard. So there are downsides to it. So I do think NoFap is positive overall. But I also think that, if it's detracting from your life to practice NoFap so much, then just fucking fap. It's not a big deal. So that's one thing. I also, overall, I like this channel because of the drama. I want Ganstar back and Hormaxer and some of these, Mr. Slave. Alex, your stream last night with the Looks for All competition went up to, I think, 400 live viewers. So that was probably one of your most active live streams. Let's bring on the shit show. Let's bring on the cringe. Let's have people raging at each other. Let's devolve into Neanderthals.
I like to balance it out. I know you're kind of like partially trolling, but I like to have like a balance between like value and like intellectual discussions and some of a shit show. I don't want it to be like an all drama channel. That's like not the direction I want to go in. But yeah, that was pretty interesting last night. Like last night wasn't just pure drama. There was drama for sure, but there was also like I think a good amount of value if you know where to look. You got scene and field. You got to see like a breakdown, what works, what doesn't work. So yeah, that's kind of like the type of stuff I like more. Mr. Slave is not banned from my channel. Mr. Slave can come on wherever he wants, so he's not banned or anything like that. So yeah, he's welcome to come on whenever. Ganstar can come on the minute that he buys his plane ticket and agrees to the competition that he challenged me to. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. Or if he apologizes for fucking the massive amounts of self-promotion and breaking rules, I'll bring him back if he does that too. But yeah, cool. Let's go to Alexander Replica.
Great. Well, thank you guys all for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation with everybody. Alex, I think you have a very good approach to dating. Good advice for men. That's something that I noticed watching your videos in the past. I think it's pretty pro-social. It's very constructive. It's not ideological or destructive. I've always thought, of all the dating channels that I subscribe to on YouTube, I think yours is like the only one that I'm actually subscribed to that I see popped up, because I always thought it was pretty pro-social. And well, I really enjoyed all the questions from everybody and all of the topics that we covered. There's many more, perhaps at some later future date that we could go over. Kyla, I really liked your thoughts on personality as well, on how even if personality is not easily to shift, it's not easy to be shifted, there are behavioral changes that can be made that can still be quite profound for the individual. And so certainly that's a good perspective on it when we get too black-pilled thinking about personality, like, personality doesn't change very much. But behavioral changes can be made that can be impactful and meaningful for individuals. So worth keeping in mind there. And I thought that was a very good point that you made. And again, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed having you on. You seem like a pretty base dude. We disagreed maybe on a few things, but you seem very reasonable. And yeah, major respect. And let's definitely get you on again at some point in the future.
If you guys want more from Alex, check him out on Twitter. He releases like research all the time. I reach
Yeah, Alex, tell the guys where they can find you and all that.
Yeah, so mostly on a daily basis, where I'm most active now is on Twitter. I do make videos on YouTube. I have my YouTube is alex.datepsych. I have a website where I post all of my original research and longer articles, a lot of statistics and data, datepsychology.com. And on Twitter, yeah, like I said, that's where I'm mostly active. And I post summaries of research, new research, brand new research every day, every single day. And that's just datepsych is the Twitter handle. So any of those places, you guys can follow me there.
Yeah, Alex, just text Kyla or message her, however you guys communicate, all the links, and I'll put them in the description.
All right, great.
In the next hour. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, this was a massive change from last night, where we got into this big ass fucking shit show. But I think it was good. I think we covered a lot of interesting points. So if you guys enjoy more like intellectual type of discussion, I think this was good. And also tomorrow we're going to do speed dating. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm dropping a pretty cool video tomorrow afternoon. So that should be good. So tomorrow we're doing speed dating. Wednesday, I think we have something. I don't remember what we have on Wednesday. But yeah, tomorrow's speed dating. So tune in for that. And yeah, check out Kyle's channel. Check out Alexander's channel. Check out Vic's channel. Check out Dennis's channel. But yeah, appreciate you all. Have a good night, guys. Take it easy.
Cheers.